Hey guys, uh, hit me with a +1 if you can see and hear me. No countdown today, just shooting the shit. Oh, here we go. +1 if you can see and hear me. Sorry about that. I guess you can hear me because I had another browser window open. So yeah, I'm joined by one of the people I most despise of this whole commentary community, Brian Berlaic. Now I despise him for very, very good reasons. Number one, he's smart as fuck and makes me look like a fool. So I hate him for that. Number two, he's always like with a tie and his nicely, starched shirt, and he makes me look like a bum. He makes me look bad, motherfucker. But here, how's it going, Brian? Good to see you, my friend.
It's going okay, I guess.
I think that's the best intro you've ever gotten, huh?
Yeah.
No, man, we're gonna dive right into it. This bridge bombing, right? Everybody knows more or less what's going on, and if you don't know, if you're waking up in the States, the Kerch Bridge connecting the Crimea to the mainland of Russia got blown up. Now, it's unclear at this point what it was. It looks like some sort of truck bomb, potentially a suicide bomber. And from what I understand, interestingly enough, I wanted to run this by you. Did you know that on one end of the bridge, I forget which one, they had a machine that detects explosives, but not on the other? Okay, so they must have known that, number one. And number two, the fact that they blew it up right when that fuel train was passing by means that they knew that that was coming and they were hoping for that effect. The SBU immediately took credit for it. I'm not going to doubt them. What do you think? You think they did it?
Well, yeah, either they or their sponsors or a combination of the two. I saw the footage. Everyone is saying that it's most likely that truck that you see in the video. There's a car that gets basically vaporized as well, civilians. Yeah. I'm not so sure. I'm just going to wait and see what the investigation says, because you really can't tell where the explosion is coming from. It's just the truck is there, there's a flash, and everything is gone. Part of the roadway collapsed. The railway section is supposedly still intact.
Two pieces of it collapsed.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah, two sections.
No, but they were separated. I'm guessing, okay, that the bomb blew up and that section was broken, and it must have shifted the other. This section gets blown up. It shifts this one that remains, and the one over here sort of like fell over. It must have been something like that. When I saw it, I thought to myself, it's no big deal, because the support columns are still there on both the train line and the car line. And so replacing those sections, it's going to take time. It's not the end of the world. And according to chat, correct us if we're wrong, the Russian Ministry of Transportation is saying that they're going to have the trains running by the end of today. Yeah. So it means nothing. Yeah. Oh, you heard that too?
Yes. Well, we'll see if that happens, but that's what they've said. But even if it's not today, it's like a couple of days from now. I still think that more or less diminishes the impact of the attack. Certainly, I mean, Ukraine, there's people there taking credit for it. They've been talking about destroying the bridge since it was built.
Yeah.
And now the thing that struck me most about this is the timing, because we saw the offensives launched at Kherson and then Kharkov. And then there's been this talk on both sides about another one toward Melitopol. And what they're trying to do is sever the land bridge between Russian forces in Kherson and everyone else in Russia. But you wouldn't truly sever forces there if the Crimean bridge was still intact and traffic was moving along it. So they hit that. Most likely, if they're going to do this offensive, they will do it very, very soon. Like at any moment now, they could launch that offensive, because like you said, like we're talking about, what if they repair it and then it's not severed? So there's this disruption. There's a bit of a disruption. Yeah.
It's kind of like those attacks on Belgorod at the beginning of the conflict, that these very ballsy helicopter pilots, who are probably dead now, poor bastards, who flew really right, like about 50, it looked like maybe 20 meters off the ground all the way to Belgorod, which is quite the trick to do at night. And they bombed Belgorod, and it meant nothing. I mean, this is my thinking, and I want to run by you. That see the Nord Stream, that was terrorism, outright, right? And now this, right? Now, insofar as this operation, or whatever you want to call it, my thinking is that the Zelensky regime would never have done it without the okay of NATO.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's a reasonable inference?
Yeah, and if NATO wasn't a participant, that's the way I see it.
My thinking is that what they're trying to do, and I think the Russians know this, they are trying to do a moment that makes the Russians overreact. I think that that's what they're aiming for, and I think that what they're trying to get is a Pearl Harbor moment, where the Russians overreact and say, "See," and now we get to go in and do whatever the hell we want to. Do you think that that's basically what's going on?
Yeah, I think they're trying to provoke Russia. You can see the impact this is having too. You can see people who are pro-Russian beyond hysterical at this point. Yeah, beyond hysterical.
I mean, I got blocked by Tom Foudy. You know Tom Foudy?
Yeah.
Well, on my
why did he block you?
Well, because he was freaking out, like throwing a hissy fit, like a goddamn girl, as far as I'm concerned, like a middle school girl, that this is a disaster and blah blah blah. And I'm like, chill the fuck out, I mean, as far as I can see, the Russians are completely winning this thing, and I don't understand this hysteria, because at the end of the day, this is my viewpoint. See, so what if you give up, some territory, if you're annihilating the opposing army? And that army has to expend waves and waves of soldiers and gear and tanks and whatnot to capture meaningless territory that doesn't have any real operational value. And you're withdrawing your troops, and you don't even have that many troops that you have to withdraw, and your losses are minuscule because, of course, you have losses. It's inevitable. POWs, killed in action. I mean, that happens even in the most orderly of retreats. But you are inflicting 4-digit losses, KIAs, on the opposing armed force for these meaningless victories. And I think of, Kherson, Zaporozhye, the Kharkov, and now the Lyman thing, all of these at catastrophic costs to the Kiev regime forces. And people are like, oh my God, they lost some cow country. They lost like some empty fields in the middle of fucking nowhere. I don't get it. I mean, it's like it's like they're girls. You know what I mean? It's they think it's a video game.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Ordinary people watching this, they see what's going on. They see something going on that they don't like. They want it instantly resolved. They want instant revenge. And when you're running a country and you're in the middle of a war, you don't have that luxury. And even just think in your personal life, how many times that has worked out well for you,
exactly.
Reacting emotionally, making decisions based on emotion rather than stopping and thinking logically, reasonably, thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead. This is what Russia is doing. And not just thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead in terms of the conflict. They're also considering economics. They're considering their ties with their allies. They're considering possible opportunities for escalation for the West. They're thinking of all of this together, and there's a composite picture that says yes or no whether to retaliate and how to retaliate. This is what they've been doing since 2015. I've been following the Russian intervention in Syria since it began, and this is exactly what. Then people would be freaking out. Why don't you nuke Ankara for shooting our Russian jet down? Well, because 10 years later, maybe you still want to have some kind of relationship with Turkey. Maybe things are going to be different. Imagine if Russia overreacted.
Yeah.
What would things look like today? And so people should keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I see. I understand the hysterical cheerleading on the side of the Kiev regime forces and fans and whatnot. Because, by the way, in the West, it seems to me that as if this conflict has degenerated into some weird kind of like sporting event that people have chosen sides. It's just really bizarre because neither side is thinking rationally. And, like I said, this guy, Tom, man, he got all pissed at me when I pointed out, who gives a shit about some fields out in a corner of Kharkov or this little burg of Lyman that means nothing when the Russian armed forces with the Wagner group are knocking on the doors of Bakhmut, where they have how many? You did a video about this. There were like 30,000 troops there, and
I don't know what the numbers are, but
I think
even
Alexander said it was 30,000.
yes, he did. He was talking some numbers. There's this guy Julian something who works for the Build. Yeah, and he is a fanatic. He is not a journalist. He is a war propagandist for NATO, for Ukraine. And for example, this morning he's talking he's talking about the bridge attack, and he's calling it an illegal bridge, and Putin the dictator inaugurated it, so this is finally the conclusion he's very happy about. But a guy like this is also pointing out at the same time that when Ukraine advances, Russia falls back, and they bring 90% of their men and equipment with them, which means you're taking territory, but you're not destroying the Russian military. On the other hand, you are losing your own army. Play that out a few steps ahead. What happens when you reach the fullest extent of your offensive? You've lost your army. Now you're stretched out physically. You're thinned out in terms of manpower and equipment. And Russia is sitting there with not only all the equipment they started out with, but 300,000 additional troops moving in. What do you do? How does the game look then? Does that look optimistic for Ukraine? And I think everyone knows this on both sides. This is this last ditch offensive, all in, and they're trying to provoke Russia, because when you're provoked, you make mistakes. Look at the people overreacting, and look at their advice, and just think about what if Russia actually did that? What a bad idea that would be.
It would be a horrible comment. Yeah, somebody asked here, Rand McCullough asked, Lira, do you still predict the U.S. will use nukes? I think that their trigger finger is itching in that regard. Because, all this talk from the West of using nukes, man, because it's strictly coming from the West. And the Russians have said and done absolutely nothing. And it's more important what they do. They haven't changed their nuclear posture at all. And even the West has admitted to the fact. And they're talking
the Pentagon. The Pentagon says that. You're not just making that up.
Yeah. And so my thinking is that all this shit is just a provocation to make hysterical people freak out and make the Russians make a mistake. That's what's going on. And I personally, this is impartial. This is just being even-handed, just looking at the situation. I think that the smartest thing for the Russians to do is chill the fuck out and just keep on doing what they're doing, because it's working for them. They don't have to do anything. And this shit, it's like a bee sting. It's annoying. It's trivial. It's not going to change your life in any meaningful way. It's certainly not going to change the outcome of this conflict. And so that's the thing that I'm struck by. Hang on a second. Let me just mute myself. And
sure,
man, I felt sick, man, and it was so awful because it was on Tuesday. I was just going great guns. I wrote like a ton of fucking stuff. Right, I was like really happy. I was really looking forward to Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to keep on working right on the book. And Tuesday night, man, I felt some cold, some bronchial thing, and here I am with cancer sticks, but what can I say, man? I'm like way stressed out. Last night here in Kharkov, there was like all kinds of bombing, man. I woke up this morning, it turns out that the Russians hit some ammo depot and just really blew it sky high, because there were like a number of huge explosions, and from my apartment I could see like some after explosions of shit firing off into the air. I assume the ammunition that was hit. Holy cow! All of these things. The thing I wanted to ask, and I'm trying to pin down this number, is that between all of these late August through September and early October offensives, right, the Kherson and all the rest up to Lyman, how many soldiers have the Ukrainians lost? Because a lot of people are saying that the Russians are taking everything so calmly. And my thinking is, if I'm on the Russian side, And I've had this past 6 weeks where my enemy has lost so many soldiers. I'm going to be very relaxed as well. Because number one, I'm going to know more or less how many soldiers he lost, and I'm going to know exactly how many soldiers I lost. And from what I can gather, it's less than a tenth of what the Ukrainians have lost over the past 6 weeks. Sorry about that.
It's okay. I think it's in the thousands. We're talking multiple brigades. A Ukrainian brigade at full strength is around 4,000. They have lost multiple brigades around Kherson, at least 1, 2, maybe 3 brigades around Kharkov. And that's when I stopped counting, because then they continued toward Lyman. And that, it was not a sweeping advance anymore. It was grinding. And they were just like they're doing around Kherson. They just throw column after column of tanks, armored vehicles, and men into Russian defenses, hoping that Russia cannot kill them fast enough. That's what they're doing. Yeah. So how can you do that? And they're losing their whole army doing this offensive.
I saw some videos. Did you see the video today of this armored vehicle carrying some soldiers, and they were all like taking videos of the road they were on, and the Ukrainian tanks on the side of the road that had been blown up in previous waves of attacks?
Yeah. Yeah, I've been seeing that. I've watched that. I mean, that's footage from Ukrainian side showing their own vehicles destroyed all along the side of the road. Then you have the Russian Ministry of Defense publishing videos from spotter drones showing columns of Ukrainian armored vehicles being attacked, destroyed, and just littering the battlefield. I don't know if I can share my screen, but people can.
Yes, you can. Go ahead. You have a button on the bottom there.
Okay. Share this one. Okay. See if we could share this article. One of my Patreon supporters sent this. My supporters are great. They send me all kinds of interesting information. They found this before I saw it. This is just from 9 hours ago. This is from ABC Australia. U.S. ammunition supplies dwindle as Ukraine war drains stockpiles. And they're talking about there's going to be certain types of ammunition they're not going to be able to send anymore. This is what I've been saying. And people said, well, you're a Putin propagandist. This is Australian media admitting this, and they're citing U.S. officials who are admitting this. U.S. stockpiles of some equipment are reaching the minimum levels needed for war plans and training. And they're talking about they're going to start working on it, replacing it, building up their capacity, their industrial capacity, but it's going to take years. Ukraine's in the middle of an offensive right now, today. They don't have years to wait for the U.S. to ramp up production. People think that it's like in a video game. You just hit the button and you lose a certain amount of credits, and then your production speeds up. It's not like that. It could take months, a year, multiple years to ramp up production. And if you go through this entire article, they're telling you they're out of everything. Artillery, 155 millimeter. I said they're sending 105 millimeter artillery pieces because they don't have ammunition for 155 millimeter guns. So why are they going to send them more guns that have no ammunition for them? So they're just, whatever is left, they're sending. They have nothing to replace this with. They don't have trained men to replace the losses they're losing right now in this offensive. This is a finite offensive, and Russia knows it. They know it. They understand this. They're looking at the same information. I've had a lot of people in the comment section say, well, Brian, how do you know that the U.S. is sending this amount of equipment? Maybe they're sending 10 times more. If they were sending 10 times more, the battlefield would look 10 times different. you know what I mean? I mean, like, yeah, exactly. It's going to manifest itself on the battlefield. Yeah. It's going to look exactly like this.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, my thinking is that the Russians have a very, very clear idea of what's going on in the battlefield, and that's why they're relaxed about it. It's everybody else that's freaking out about it. I think that they have not managed the information space very well, but they're winning. And I always think of Mao's quote. I forget the exact wording of it, but it was something along the lines of like, land doesn't matter, men do. And you can lose land and recapture it, but if you try to hold on to the land, you'll lose the men and the land. And that's what the Ukrainians are doing. They're trying to hold on to the land, and it's meaningless without knocking out your opposing armed force. I mean, it should be like obvious. And
Yeah.
I've been looking all through September at all of these offensives, and from what I understand, it's been like basically 4,000 to 6,000 KIA per offensive. And probably twice that number, if not, twice that number, because a lot of the wounded on the Kiev regime side, they die because there isn't enough medical equipment or medical people to take care of them, and so that's why their ratio of wounded in action is much smaller. It's not 2 to 3 per KIA, but it's more like 1.5 to 2 wounded per KIA. But anyway, the point is, of the killed in action, every one of them has been like between 4,000 and 6,000, credibly estimated by different people. And so you add that all up, you're talking somewhere between 12 and 16,000 killed in action. And let's make it an even 15,000 killed, and probably say 1.5 times that number of wounded, incapacitated. That's what, 22,000. So you're talking close to 40,000 men who've been put out of action in a single fucking month. You can't sustain that kind of loss. I don't care how big your army is. I mean, even the Russian army could not sustain that kind of loss. I mean, the current Russian army, not the World War II army. So I'm like, I mean, I understand the Zelensky regime cheerleaders. Why are the Russians freaking out? It's like,
they're human beings. I mean, when I first saw the news, your gut instinct is like, how is this happening? Why is this happening? Why are these people in Kiev walking around, these leaders in Kiev walking around almost completely confident that they are safe and they have nothing to worry about? Western leaders come to Kiev and visit, and they act with absolute impunity. But that's when, again, we're all human, we have emotions, but that's when you say, okay, that's what I'm thinking emotionally. Now, what are the facts? Let's put a list of facts on like just a card or something, write it out and see what it actually adds up to.
Yeah.
And if Ukraine is gaining territory and losing absolutely everything else, they're not winning. There's many different ways to measure victory on a battlefield, and you cannot deny that they are not winning territory. They absolutely are. Yeah, but they're losing equipment, they're losing people, and this is stuff that cannot be replaced. And we just looked at an article. It's even the ammunition cannot be replaced.
Yeah, and well, the other thing that it leads me to conclude is that the Russians might have a very clear notion that the Kiev regime forces might be at the very end of their tether. You yourself, in the video that you posted today, said how as they advance, they're stretching out their supply lines and thinning out their whole advance, and it can be cut, lickety split, and no problem, and cut, and those forces captured, annihilated, right? And so my thinking is that Russians probably have a very, very good sense as to how overstretched the Ukrainian forces are, and so they're relaxed about it. But my thinking is politically, though, because the West has cut off all communications from any kind of dissident, how both you and I are in constant danger of being deplatformed because we don't, toe the narrative line. I mean, come on, like we're just a couple of fucking losers talking about this shit on internet, on YouTube, right, in some obscure little corner of the internet. And we might actually be platformed, and we're microscopic. I mean, no offense to you, certainly.
No, I totally understand that I'm a very minor cog. When I see myself on lists that Kiev is putting together, I just think you guys are extremely insecure. If you only could see my daily routine, and if you think that I'm a threat, that is pretty sad.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm a borderline fat middle-aged guy, and what the fuck, who's spending most of his days writing a book on fucking philosophy and history. What the fuck? How am I a danger? But it's the thing is that they are gaslighting their own people. That's the thing, and that's what has me completely worried. because they're going to do this and show, oh, the Ukraine's struck against this key bridge, that without this bridge, Russia collapses, right? And so they're going to argue that it seems that they're building the ramp so as to do some sort of false flag operation and blame it on the Russians. I mean, that's my thinking. That's the only thing that makes any kind of sense. You know what I mean?
If anyone in your audience is not listening to Alex Christoforou, his daily videos, him and Alexander Micuris, they do videos together, as the Duran. They both have their own channels. They do excellent work across the board. But Alex Christoforou has been really on target in explaining this propaganda campaign about Russia never said anything about using nuclear weapons at all. And they've even come out and said, no, we're not talking about doing that. And so he's explaining why they're building up this narrative. And again, you have to, I'm watching the offensive, and I know that I don't know exactly when Ukraine is going to be out of steam and be left vulnerable, but I cannot imagine that their sponsors don't have some sort of next step after that. And it's going to be a desperate next step, because what else do they have? And you could see that this hitting the Crimean Bridge, all of these things are for optics. It's for panicking, and it's working. It's panicking people in Russia, Russia's supporters, and it's supposed to get the gears going for some sort of political upheaval and perhaps conclusion to this conflict before it concludes militarily. And if it concludes militarily, it most certainly will conclude in Russia's favor. So they're trying to get this. This is exactly what Germany was doing at the end of World War II. And it's only going to work if people who support Russia start freaking out and don't take a deep breath and think logically. Go read The Art of War by Sun Tzu. It's online for free. Just go read through it and see what they say about keeping your emotions in check and provoking the emotions of your enemy, and ask yourself if that isn't what this looks like. Because the offensive, Ukraine's offensive, what do you think it's going to do? Do you think they're going to take Crimea? Do you think they're going to take Moscow? No, let's get real. It's not. It's got an expiration date, and when it reaches that date, they're done. There's nothing else that can happen for them unless NATO intervenes directly, which might be another possibility that this is all leading up to.
My thinking is that NATO won't intervene militarily in any kind of direct fashion because they don't have the gear for it. They don't have the gear and they don't have the men. And they're scared of the Russians because the Russians do have a panoply of weapon systems that the West cannot match. And that's a fact. And the Yavoriv thing at the beginning of the war, that put the fear of God into them. Were it not for that hit on the Yavoriv training center, which is in Western Ukraine, which happened, I think it was the 11th of March, where they wiped out at least 400 foreign fighters. And something else they didn't talk about, they blew up at least $400 million worth of Western gear, because that seems to have been like a weapons depot for a lot of NATO stuff. Because Yavoriv is like about, I do believe it's something like 40 kilometers, about 25 miles from the border with Poland. So it's that perfect distance where you can ship stuff back and forth and no problem. I mean, you can have it there and then pull it out real quick and put it back in. And I think that it caught them with their pants down with weapon systems that they couldn't even see coming. And it freaked them out. And that's why the Pentagon, as I understand it, and Larry Johnson has been saying the same thing that he got from other sources, pretty much the same information, that they're like, no, we do not want American troops on the ground there, but there are shitloads of contractors. And the other thing that I insist on is that all of these weapon systems, the M777s, the HIMARS, all of them are operated by American troops, American or British troops. I mean, somebody with a NATO background who might have been, handed in his letter of resignation and 2 minutes later signed a contract with a military contractor to operate those weapon systems, because there's no way that the Ukrainians could have done it because they don't have the time to train for them, right? And so, yeah, it is a proxy war. NATO does have boots on the ground. I can say that I've heard a lot of fucking English speakers, and that's all I'll say about that. I don't want to get myself into trouble. But My thinking is that they know that they can't put troops on the ground. They know that they cannot put up a force that could match the current Russian expeditionary force, let alone the 200,000 to 300,000 more that they're going to bring in. Which my thinking is that they're going to use that force to just sweep across the country. I think that that's the ultimate goal of the Russians. I think that they've made up their mind to take over the whole country. And I think that they know this. And so I think that they're trying to create the political justification for their own people to go nuclear. I think that that's the escalation ladder that they're on. And so you have Nord Stream, blame the Russians. The Kerch bridge thing, hey, Ukraine won, and they're going to escalate and try to slip in a nuclear weapon. What's his name? Number one, Zelensky talked about, asked NATO to do a preemptive nuclear strike. You heard that, right?
Yeah. And then I saw him walk it back also.
They all walked it back. But I mean, come on, we're all grown-ups. We know exactly what he said, right? The translation was not that goddamn bad. You know what I mean? And the other thing I've been hearing is that they're talking about, the Zelensky regime is talking about creating a dirty bomb. Because, they do have nuclear energy reactors, and they can get the material to create a dirty bomb. I mean, ultimately, I'm not sophisticated on this kind of stuff. I'm assuming that all you need to do is use the spent fuel rods and put some dynamite to them, and boom, you got a dirty bomb. Is that basically the upshot, right? I mean, this is the symptoms of desperation. They know that the end is near. And so the issue becomes, are they going to take that fatal next step? Because after that, all bets are off. What do you think? Do you think they'll do it?
I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure about that. Another thing people have to keep in mind is things like nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. That they are dangerous, obviously. I mean, a nuclear weapon could destroy a city, but we also have to, on the other hand, really think about what, okay, so you're going to use nuclear weapons. What exactly are you going to do? Especially, and especially because Russia has nuclear weapons, they can retaliate. So if you hit Moscow, they're going to hit London, Brussels, Washington. It's a done deal. So why would you do that? I would not underestimate NATO. I don't want to make the mistake of doing that, but I generally agree with the what you're saying about their capabilities and their ability. They're kind of wading into it in this more indirect way. And does it really seem like it's going well for them? And do they extrapolate from that a good outcome if they got more directly involved? Will they try to do the buffer zone option, which I've been talking about since this all began, just like they did in Syria?
I've always thought that the Poles would take West, and that the Russians would allow them. My thinking has been the Russians would allow it, but the line would be, Lviv, Ternopil, around there, like just that Western. What?
Yeah. I mean, they would say you could have it. We don't want it. You could have it.
And my thinking has always been that the Poles want that land so desperately, or Kaczynski, Janusz Kaczynski wants it so badly, that the Russians would say, okay, you can have that sliver, and they would shove out all the Nazi crazies in Ukraine and dump them there and create for Poland a Vietnam, basically, because these guys are fucking nuts. I mean, they're crazy, okay? And so, of course, the Russians don't want to hold on to them. They don't want to deal with them. So they shove them over to Lviv, and all of a sudden it's Poland's problem. I mean, that's always been my thinking. That sliver of Western Ukraine, then there's the rump Ukraine state, and everything east of the Dnieper and south of Dnipropetrovsk, all the way up to Transnistria, goes to the Russians, and that's all she wrote. But the West cannot, it doesn't allow for the end of this. The West keeps doubling down, and I don't know where they end. Where's their off-ramp, When do you think that they say, enough, this is not working, we have to end this? Do you see any of that? Because I don't see any opposition to this bullshit.
Talking about escalation, I'm looking on Twitter. I can't contribute on Twitter because I'm banned, suspended.
You do.
But I can read it. I can still read it.
Pinky handshake, whatever that childish thing was. Yeah, go ahead.
So I was just looking at the reaction. What are people on Twitter? And I see a lot of blue check marks. They're cackling. They're celebrating the the death and destruction caused on the Crimean Bridge, and
Oh,
they're I see people
you know what that
saying,
reminds
"Oh,
me of?
look."
You know what that reminds you of? I'm sorry. You know what that reminds you of? In when the German leadership was stuck in their bunker and they heard that FDR had died, they broke out the champagne and celebrated, and they actually thought that this was a turning point in the war. Did
Yeah,
you ever hear that story? Yeah, it's like that.
and so they're saying we hit the Crimean Bridge. Look, it's not civilian infrastructure. Look, they've got a train with military equipment going across it. I'm just thinking, do you truly believe that roads, airports, bridges in Ukraine haven't been hit yet because Russia cannot hit them, or because they've decided up until now not to hit them? And if you want to say that anything that has ever had a tank drive across it is now a military target, that pretty much makes every road and bridge in Ukraine a potential target. Is that the road no pun intended, is that the road you want to go down on? Now, I see someone in the comments, the Duran. I don't know if it's the Duran, but they
Oh,
make a good point, coincidentally.
is it the
Regime,
Duran?
it
Can you
says,
highlight it?
I don't know how to from here, but it says
I think
regime.
that if you hit on the comment, in your StreamYard's window, I think you can highlight it. Feel free to do
Um,
so.
I'm trying to, but it's not
Okay.
letting me. But I'll just read it out. It says regime change is the Hail Mary goal. If they can't get regime change, then the collective West will build a wall, new Iron Curtain. Europe loses big time, which I completely agree. And regime change is, but
Hang on a second. I mean, to answer that, if it's the Duran, if it's Alex Christoforou, I assume who's running that. Alex, send me an email and I'll send you the link to join us if you want to. Okay, I'm
just hop
sorry.
on. That
I'm
would be
sorry. What?
great.
What?
But well, I mean, something that Alexander Mikuris has been saying is about the political landscape in Russia. It's not that there's a large amount of Russian people who are against the war or wanted to stop. What they're upset about is, just like we were just saying, is that it's not being fought aggressively enough. So what kind of political change do you think you're going to spur in Russia through some attempted regime change? You can see what the climate is in Russia. You're only going to open the door to more escalation. You're not going to get some sort of political reprieve by somehow you take out Putin, and then who takes over? You want
Medvedev.
yeah, you
Medvedev is
want
going to
someone
take
like
over.
that in.
Yeah,
So
he is. Holy cow. He is just like, ready for bear. Excuse the pun, but he is just he's on fire, man. I thought he was. I thought he was a moderate, to tell you the truth. Well, he used to be a moderate.
yeah,
Hello?
well, look, it was a different time. It was a different time, and he was playing his role well. I don't think Russia was ever naive into thinking the West was ever going to be their friend, but they made a very concerted attempt to smooth things over and move forward together into the future, and the West just wouldn't have it. And so when it's not working, you need to stop trying to do the same thing over and over again, thinking there's going to be a different result, and you need to change your posture.
The thing also is that they don't seem to understand. They talk about regime change, and Alex, I know, I don't think I'm putting words in his mouth when I say that Alex has been saying that they just want to change it from Putin to whomever,
Yeah.
and they'll work with that. They'll work with whoever comes up on top in the Kremlin. But they don't seem to understand that the Kremlin as an entity, as a political entity, okay, the whole leadership class in Russia, they know that the West wants to kill them all, destroy them all. Okay.
Yes.
And so they understand, no, Putin is our guy because he represents all of us, because all of us are going to have our heads on a pike if the West gets its druthers. So they have no intention of getting rid of Putin. And besides, I think that the smarter people in the Russian leadership, they certainly understand that Putin has been handling this exceptionally well. And people like Lavrov, like Shoigu, they are happy with the job he's doing because they understand that he's pretty much on the money. And so the idea that he's going to be knocked out in a palace coup, I think, is absurd. Because even if Putin's position were weak, all the others know that the West wants them dead. They all know that the West wants to break up Russia, and all these people are nationalists. And on top of that, a final point is that with the mobilization and the scaremongering among the more Western inclined Russians, who the more, let's show me so, industrious, more ambitious people have fled Russia, at least a couple of 100,000, say it's 1 million, just for shits and giggles. If 1 million of those much more pro-Western Russians have left for Georgia, for Kazakhstan, I follow a whole bunch of channels of these pro-Western Russians who used to blog from Russia. They all left. And I think that what that means is that the people who have remained are far more hardcore. They are not going to give up the ghost because they feel that this is really existential. And they know that it's not against Ukraine. Ukraine is just a proxy. And they all understand that this is a fight to the death with NATO and the West. And they're up for that war. They're going to make it happen. They're not going to back off.
And I like what you just said. It's a reality check. Russian President Vladimir Putin is not Russia. He is one man in a network of interests, administrators. Pretty much every country is. It's just a matter of how much influence does, say, the U.S. have over that country and that circle of interest. But every country has their own circle of interest that are invested in that particular country. Even the United States does. They're not running things in the U.S., but there are groups, circles of interest in the U.S. who care about the U.S. Welcome, Alex.
Whoa, is that Alexander Solzhenitsyn I see?
Wearing a hat.
How are you?
How's it going, man? Good to see you.
Hey, Gonzalo. Good to see you. How you feeling, Gonzalo? Better?
Oh, man. Well, the thing is, see, when I get a little bit overexcited, I'm like, oh man, a cigarette would be great, and like my bronchial tubes are just fluey, man. I was out for like 4 days, and now I'm smoking again. This is the first couple of cigarettes I've had since Tuesday, and I already can feel that I'm going to be paying for it. But anyway, great to have you on. Your thoughts on the Kerch
Gonzalo, hey, Brian. Great video, Brian, that you just did on the Kerch Bridge. I actually cited it in my video.
Thank you.
I cited Brian's analysis on my video that I did. I just got up. Yeah.
Hell of a
regime
story,
change.
man.
I think you guys were talking about it. They want regime change, and they're trying to do everything they can to get the regime change. Okay, this was a huge escalation. I mean, this is, let's be honest. This is a terrorist attack against the Russian Federation. It is what it is. It's a terrorist attack. It was against any other country.
I cannot believe that I'm saying this, but the United States is a terrorist state. It is indisputably a terrorist state. Nord Stream, and then giving the go-ahead for this bombing. Look, it appears at this time that it was a truck, and these trucks are not self-driving, so it was a suicide bomber. I mean, holy shit.
I mean, if it was a truck, I have a lot of reason to believe the poor guy driving it had no idea that was a one-way trip.
Poor bastard.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
I
think there's a lot of people that are already starting to go through the video evidence and question the truck bomber narrative that we.
No. This is supposition at this point.
There's a lot of it's starting now. It's all starting, the questioning, the going through all the everything that happened. But the Washington Post, actually, I haven't been able to confirm it, but I just saw it on Telegram that the Washington Post has said that the SBU has come out and said that they did it.
Yeah, they did come out and say it. Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, by the way,
so I haven't been able to double check it.
Let me just say to chat, if you have any commentator that you want to bring on, get their attention and tell them to get in touch with me or Alex O'Brien, and I'll be happy to send them the link to join the broadcast, because this is like another open house, man. It's just for, I just wanted to do the impromptu because this is just, we are escalating fucking fast, man. Less than 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, we had Nord Stream, and here we are with this bridge bombing, which we discussed earlier with Brian, that it's not going to affect the Russian military in any kind of meaningful sense. It's an annoyance, certainly, but it's not a make or break kind of situation by any stretch of the imagination. And the Russian Ministry of Transportation is saying that they'll have the railroad fixed by today. Even if it's not today, even if it's in a couple of days, it's not that big of a deal because the structural pylons that were holding up the sections were untouched. And that's what matters in any kind of bridge like that. You can replace the sections fairly
But it's
easily.
symbolic. To
know,
me, it's there's a military angle. It's a symbolic. I mean, it really is the connection of Crimea and the Russian Federation. I mean, that is the real symbolism of it all. And it's, to me, it's all about creating the dynamics for someone. This is what the West is saying. Someone anywhere in the Kremlin. We don't care who it is.
Yeah.
Someone do something to get rid of Putin. That's their thinking. That's their hope. That's their Hail Mary pass. So, some general or someone somewhere in the Kremlin in Red Square, just find a way to get rid of this guy. And then they'll deal with everything else later.
Sometimes when you throw that Hail Mary pass, it gets intercepted and they run it all the way back for a touchdown.
most of the times.
I'm looking at the Washington Post article that you were just talking about, Alex. It's titled "Explosion Hits Crimean Bridge, Damaging Russian Supply Route."
On screen?
Yes, I can. And this one here. And I'll go down to the part. It says a Ukrainian government official told the Washington Post on Saturday that Ukrainian special services were behind the bridge attack. The Ukrainska Pravda news site first reported the government's role, citing an unidentified law enforcement official who said Ukraine's security service SBU was involved. That's the Washington Post.
Okay. Yeah. I heard it from somebody on Twitter that was saying that the SBU was taking responsibility for it. I mean, my thinking is that they got the go-ahead from Washington. Alex, what do you think of that?
It is Ukrainsky Pravda, so I guess the Washington Post is saying that Ukrainsky Pravda is saying that they have sources in the SBU that are claiming responsibility. I think it's okay. I mean, I don't know how involved Washington or NATO are with this. Who knows? The end result, the end goal is the same. The end goal is the same, and all these forces are working together to get rid of Putin, and that's why they're coming out and they're celebrating it and they're taunting Russia. And you have the Estonian Prime Minister or President was saying, "Good job." Who's that guy's name? Sikorsky. He tweeted. Yeah. He tweeted.
Oh, he tweeted something after the thanks USA.
Yeah.
After that one, he tweeted. What did he tweet?
Something along the same, something like what he did last time, like one of those tweets. I don't even know. Good job or something. I don't know. Whatever. He tweeted his support for what happened. I mean, this is like high school stuff. These are high schoolers. Our leadership in the West, they are high schoolers. Yeah. And they're just trying to taunt, embarrass, humiliate the Russians into doing something. They want Russia to escalate. That's the part that I haven't been able to piece together. I don't know what you guys think.
Sorry, Alex, let me ask you something totally different. Is Zariel your moderator?
Yes. Yeah, I think he's on the stream. Yeah.
Okay, Zariel, I'm going to make you a moderator. Do your thing, man. I just made you a moderator, and I'd appreciate if you because he was saying that there was some porn stuff happening, and because I wasn't able to fix the comment moderation stuff. So Zariel, do your thing. Sorry about that, Alex. Please continue.
No, I was just going to ask you guys, Brian, Gonzalo. I mean, the one part that I can't piece together is why would they want Russia to escalate? To me, it seems like they want Russia to escalate.
Oh yeah, of course. They want a Pearl Harbor moment. They want a Pearl Harbor moment. See? They want a Gulf of Tonkin moment, a Pearl Harbor moment, a trigger that can allow them to open up the money spigot and the war spigot. That's the whole point of this. And I started saying, well, my Twitter account is gone, but I said in a long Twitter thread that the smart thing that the Russians could do, and I said this back in April or May, certainly, I said that the smart thing for the Russians to do is to keep this war as boring as possible. It's just a slow, relentless grind that does not give the Americans that dramatic moment for them to escalate. I mean, look at American foreign policy historically. It's always been, remember the Maine or the Gulf of Tonkin or Pearl Harbor or 9/11, the war on terror. The Americans, they get hyped up when they see some sort of dramatic, seemingly catastrophic attack on them. And that's when they hop on their horse and go off and ride helter-skelter and do all kinds of damage everywhere, okay? And so, the USS Maine, the Gulf of Tonkin, Pearl Harbor, 9/11, it's always the same playbook. And that's how they manipulate the American people into going into these pointless wars that they have no business being involved in. And so that's what they're going to do. That's what they're trying to trigger the Russians into doing. And I think that the Russians are smart enough to realize this. And I think that that's what's causing so much frustration among a lot of the Russian commentariat, that the Russians are not going a whole hog. Putin and the Kremlin are playing it slow. And they're smart to do so. Because at the end of the day, as I said at the beginning of this broadcast, I don't know if you caught it, the war is won by destroying the enemy army. That's how you win every war. And the Russians, whether you like it or not, whichever side you're on, you have to admit, that's what they have been doing, and very effectively, of just grinding away at the Zelensky regime forces. And so all they have to do is keep on doing what they're doing and keep it low drama. No big sweeping explosions, no dramatic moment that will give the West, the Americans, the excuse to get, all hands on deck and let's go to war. I mean, that's my thinking. See, Alex, what do you think of that?
No, I was going to ask Brian. You put up an article from Australia, I believe, where they outline how the U.S. is pretty much running out of weapons and ammo. So, if their goal is if the U.S.'s goal is to get involved, how do you explain their goal to get involved, unless they really want to get involved in a heavier way than just conventional? Because it looks like the U.S. I know Europe is dry, guys. They don't have anything else left to send Ukraine.
Well, it's a couple of things. I kind of agree with Gonzalo about, they're trying to build this narrative. Actually, Alex, you were saying this narrative building. They're saying, Russia's military is done. They're desperate. Look, they just hit the bridge. They'll do anything. And so, they're teeing up a possible false flag. And if people think that's just conspiracy theory, the U.S. did this repeatedly in Syria. It didn't work. And I don't think that it's a viable strategy, but it's not beyond them to try something like that. Now, if they were to get Russia to escalate, or, this is the thing that's bothering me. Ukraine is out of weapons, they're out of ammunition. It's impossible to pin down, the day where, it'll manifest itself on the battlefield, obviously. But the day is coming. The West is admitting it. Even extremely fanatical pro-Ukrainian voices out there are admitting this. What is their move that they're going to make once Ukraine is fully overextended, thinned out, and now the momentum is about to shift? What are they going to do? And I like you, Alex, maybe Gonzalo, I don't know what they're going to do. We were talking about how they're like high schoolers. Well, a lot of high schoolers do stuff without thinking about what they're going to do next. They didn't think 2 or 3 steps down the road. You can see how the West has painted themselves into a corner in so many different ways that defies leadership that would be thinking a few steps ahead. So maybe this is just another example of they're in the corner. They're just pushing any button that they can. They hit this bridge and they're just celebrating. I don't know. It could be that, but we have to be very vigilant. This is an extremely dangerous period of time, yes, because the offensive is going to run out, and they need to do something after that, because after that, Russia is going to have the advantage, and momentum will permanently shift in Russia's favor.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think that like I said earlier to Brian, I don't know if you heard that, Alex, that it reminds me of when the Third Reich leadership heard about the death of Roosevelt,
Yeah.
in April of '45, and they were all hunkered down in their bunker, and they were thinking that, and they started celebrating, thinking this was like a turning point. I think that a lot of the hysteria that you're seeing on Twitter is exactly that kind of hysteria, because it comes from knowing that you're losing and being unwilling to accept it, and you grab on to any trivial victory, because this was a trivial victory. I mean, it really was. If it doesn't really interrupt the flow of Russian weapons from the mainland to Crimea, then it was pointless. It was, for the headlines. And so I think that that might be part of it. But I agree with you, Alex, that my great fear is that they're going to do something really, really stupid. And potentially not even in Ukraine. They might do something in the West. Maybe I'm going to say something outrageous, but think it. Maybe they blow up the NATO headquarters and blame it on the Russians. Who would be able to dispute them? Yeah, I mean, suppose they put their own a bomb in the in NATO headquarters and blow it up, and maybe they take out Jens Stoltenberg for the benefit of humanity. Oh man, I think I did a boo-boo there. But anyway, the point is, see, if they were to do something like that, some sort of false flag on Western territory, maybe they would have the excuse to go in hard against Russia. I don't know. I mean, these people are crazy.
Look at the political climate in the West and in Russia. In Russia, they're trying to create political upheaval, but the atmosphere there is in support of the operation, in support of escalating. They want escalation. They don't want to continue being patient. And so I guess if you're a leader, it's always good to have the people wanting you to do more in the direction you're already going than opposing you. In the West, people are opposed to what's going on right now. More and more people are literally protesting in the streets against any involvement in the situation in Ukraine. For Russia, it's existential. For the West, it is not. It is that it's not their future is not tied. The future of the ruling elite may be, but not in the same way as Russia. So it's just one of these things where it's unprecedented. It's very hard to predict what's going to happen next.
Alex, you said something that Putin's support had dropped from 82% to 77%, or perhaps it was Alexander who said
Alexander.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
but the point is, I thought to myself, who those 5% were who lost the support? They're the guys who are saying, this guy is a weakling. We have to go whole hog. We have to put in more tanks, put those T-90s to work, I mean, go for broke. Those are the people who are no longer supporting Putin. So, of course, I mean, you see my point. And to buttress what Brian is saying, everybody in Russia is on the same side because they know what this actually is. I mean, chat, who do you think? Well, I'll get to a question to the chat later, but my question also, I want to pivot a little bit to China and India. Because I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm coming to the conclusion that this war has been the greatest thing possible in terms of the relationship between Russia and China and Russia and India, because all of a sudden China and India realize how much they actually need Russia and that they cannot depend on the West, because the West will arbitrarily decide to say, oh, you're on the naughty list, and start cutting off oil or food or whatever, sanctions, which will only hurt the people of those countries. And I think that the Russians strategically, on a strategic level, insofar as their relationships with China and India, are in the driver's seat. I think that this whole thing, this very careful diplomacy on the part of Putin and Lavrov, has led to a situation where China and India know that they cannot abandon Russia ever. Do you guys agree with this?
Well, I will connect Russia and China here. When you look at Twitter, the reaction to this attack, you see the collective West essentially celebrating the destruction of a bridge connecting people together. You have to think, what kind of civilization celebrates the destruction of bridges connecting people together. What is the West building, and why is the West constantly actually just blowing up infrastructure? The destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines, the attempted complete destruction of this bridge. This is not the first time that this has happened. The West, the U.S., has been waging a war against China's One Belt, One Road initiative, which Russia is involved in. Some in Europe were involved in it. And if you look at every one of these conflicts that you see flare up like a separatist group somewhere, and you do the research, because I have, separatists in Baluchistan, Pakistan, that is sponsored by the U.S., and they are trying to destroy pipelines, rail lines, roads, dams in Pakistan, built in cooperation with China. In Myanmar, there's a U.S.-backed armed opposition that is attacking pipelines that are part of the Belt and Road Initiative going through Myanmar. Here in Thailand, the U.S.-backed opposition, they haven't blown anything up, but they have come out in opposition of Thailand working with China to build high-speed rail. I mean, it's already under construction, and they're coming out opposed to it. If they had their way, they would reverse it, undo it. And this is something the U.S. is sponsoring around the globe. Anytime there's any infrastructure, they are targeting it. They're targeting it because it's Eurasia, essentially, and its partners moving on without the West. They're building things. Their economies are growing, and they are just moving on without the collective West. And the West, in the interest of their hegemony, they need to stop this. So they're attacking the infrastructure. And again, just what kind of society celebrates destroying bridges rather than wanting to build them? I mean, when you look at the comments, it's an illegal bridge, anything connecting with Russia. I mean, that the Ukrainian regime installed from 2014 onward is just a irrationally anti-Russian project that just does things that make no sense for the actual best interests of the people living within those borders.
Well, they don't care about the people living in their own borders, or else they would have gone to the negotiating table back in March. I mean, they do not care about the Ukrainian people at all. And worse than that, they have convinced people that they do, that they are speaking for all of Ukrainian people. And the Ukrainian people, in their naivete, believe them. And so they're being used as cannon fodder for no reason whatsoever. But the United States really is the empire of chaos, really is a regime. It's a terrorist state. Somebody has to say it, because all these activities that the United States is doing, everything that you enumerated, Brian, and these two attacks on Nord Stream and the Kerch Bridge, these are the acts of a terrorist state. They keep insisting that other people are terrorist states. I don't see the Russians carrying out terrorism. Terrorism being random attacks against civilians to further political objectives. I do not see the Russians doing that at all. When they hit a target, they have a very good military reason to hit it, whereas the United States consistently carries out extraordinarily destructive measures that hurt the people. The sanctions regimes, they never, ever have undermined a regime in any country that's been targeted by sanctions. They only hurt the people. And paradoxically, every time a country gets hit by sanctions, it strengthens the regime because the people feel that they are being attacked by the United States and the West. And it's so self-destructive in terms of achieving your political goals, and so inhumane. I think that that's the thing that bothers me the most. I'm speaking dead seriously here, no fooling around. These policies of sanctions, of terrorist acts that the United States either commits directly or sponsors, these are terrorist acts that are inhumane. They are evil. I mean, as simple as that, not more complicated than that. And so, as far as I'm concerned, and you know, the Nord Stream 2 thing really set it in my mind, and it's not going to get dislodged. The United States is a terrorist state. It is a state sponsor of terrorism. It is the thing that they accuse every one of their competitors of being. They are that thing. And that's the thing about the American regime. They constantly project onto their enemies the evil that is within their own hearts. I find them despicable. I have no intention of ever returning to the West. I'll tell you that right now.
They talk about say like China being a threat to global peace and stability, but it is actually the United States. Or when they accuse Russia of that, it's like you said, projection. Think about what the alternative future would have been if Nord Stream 2 was completed, cheap energy was flowing into Europe. Europe and Russia were working closer together. Do you think there would be some sort of motivation for Russia to get involved militarily anywhere to jeopardize that? They were being as careful as possible to try to salvage that, and they couldn't, and that's why it ended up like this. And also Europe and China were growing closer together, and the U.S. saw this. And they openly said, we're going to put a stop to this. You're not doing Nord Stream 2. You're not buying Huawei from China. You're not doing 5G with Huawei. You're going to cut all of that, and you're going to get in line. We are going to wage this. I guess it's becoming increasingly an overt war against Russia, China, and anyone who sides with them. And then we're watching that unfold. It is extremely it's an extremely dangerous period of time because the United States has had this advantage economically, militarily, and as it fades, their acts of desperation become more and more dangerous.
It's beyond desperation. It's becoming like hysterical. I mean, don't you agree, Alex?
I kind of thought about this a lot, actually, the past couple of weeks. And I'm starting to come to the conclusion that there are powers in the U.S. Maybe this is just me throwing it out there to you guys as well, that there might be powers in the U.S. that kind of are saying, you know what? Yes, we're gonna go full speed as much as we can to hold on to our unipolar hegemony, our power. Yeah, we're gonna do it, but just in case things don't work out, isn't it better to be a big fish in a little pond than to try and just share the wealth of the world with China and India and Russia? So if that's the case, let's start actually splitting up the world. And I mean, like physically, they're splitting up the world, like severing pipelines and cutting things, building walls. I mean, Finland's building a wall.
Literally
building a wall. Like literally, like, you know, when we heard about Trump building a wall, they were freaking out. But now we're literally building an iron curtain, new iron curtain. So I'm starting to believe that there might be some forces at work. I'm not saying I know anything, or I'm not saying, you know, what I'm saying, that this may even make sense. But you know, I start to think to myself that perhaps there are some people that are saying, you know, at least let's have all of Europe and Canada and Australia and New Zealand and whatever we can get in South America as well. You know, if we can get some countries there, let's just, you know, have these countries be our absolute complete subjects from top to bottom, like completely 1000% dependent on us for everything. We don't care about the people, how happy the people are in Europe, if they have good jobs, if they're living a good life. We don't care. We just want these territories, these states, to be full on satellites, like full, no sovereignty whatsoever.
Colonies.
Yeah, exactly. There's colonies, real colonies, and if the other Eurasian world order and, you know, Asian countries, if they go their own way, well, go your own way. But, you know, we're building a wall. We're closing the door, and we're going to build a wall, and we'll wait you guys out like we did last time, 50, 70 years, whatever. I mean, maybe there are people thinking like that. Maybe they're not. But
well, the key trigger, I think, and I've been following the economic situations for decades at this point, right? And basically, the West, the collective West, is way over indebted. It is so over indebted because it had two desires. On the one hand, to have this welfare state across the West, and also, of course, the inherent corruption of the military-industrial complex and the other industrial complexes, the pharmaceutical and tech and all the rest of it. And so they wanted to give this welfare state, yet maintain a monopolistic economy that allowed the rich to be as rich as they wanted without the taxation necessary to pay for the welfare state. And that's what led inevitably to the deficit spending. Now, it's something like 60% of the Western population receives some form of government assistance. Now, where's that government assistance going to come from? And so they've gone into debt. And the debt plate, you know, that game of spinning a plate, right? Where you start spinning plates, you know, magicians do it and stuff like that, right? See, there comes a moment when you can't spin enough plates insofar as debt is concerned. And I think that there is the appreciation that the 2008 global financial crisis, that was the moment. And since then, it's been absolute chaos ever since, because they realized that, and I realized at the time in 2008, that they were kicking the can down the road. And I think that a lot of people in leadership positions in the West realize this. And that can has been kicked down the road for the last 14 years. And here we are, and we are about to see a economic catastrophe in Europe. And this catastrophe is going to hit the United States within 6 to 12 months after that. And so I think that it's a last gasp to try to figure out a way to extract resources from other regions to prop up this collapsing system. If you look at the Western democracies, so-called, they're the ones that have that are over indebted. The rest of the world is not. There's actually a series of maps that's very amusing, you know, that shows, you know, what is the collective West and the map of the over indebted countries, and it's the same. You know, it's. I think it's ultimately an economics problem, and I think that you're right, that there's a group of people that recognizes that the indebtedness is over, it's collapsing. And so they have to find a way to wiggle their way out. And I think that people like Paul Krugman, whom I despise, and he's not alone, there are Joseph Stiglitz, a whole bunch of other people who think that economists, you know, Nobel Prize winning economists, you know, smirk. And these people are of the idea that a great big world war is what can save the American economy, just like it did in World War II. They don't understand the vastly different historical context of the conflict in 45 to the circumstances we have today. And so, but they don't see that. They just see, oh, there was a big war and that saved America and had, you know, 50 years, 60 years of prosperity after that. Let's do the same thing. I think that that's their rationale, as insane as it may sound. But that's ultimately, it's a problem of economics, that they're out of money. And they're out of ways to conjure or magic any kind of money. And so they're going for war. I think that it's basically that.
I agree with you, Alex, about them basically consolidating their control. I mean, look at what they did to Europe. They're consolidating their control over Europe at the cost of European prosperity, certainly at the cost of any prospect of European sovereignty, which, you know, there was this glimpse of it as they were building Nord Stream 2, as they were signing deals with China with the One Belt, One Road initiative. There was that glimpse that, oh, you know, Europe might slide out from under this shadow of hegemony, but it never happened. And that's exactly what the U.S. is doing. They're consolidating control over anyone that they can, and they are hunkering down to cut off basically the rest of the world. And the list just keeps growing in terms of the number of countries that are not interested in being a part of that and want to move on with multipolarism, essentially. Look what they were just announcing. They were announcing about how they're going to be investing all of this money in computer chip manufacturing, while at the same time encouraging Taiwan to fall on a sword the U.S. is giving them, fighting the rest of China. And it's just so obvious what is going on, what is going to happen to the people in Taiwan. They're going to use them just as they're using Ukraine right now to just create as much havoc, cost China as much as possible in every possible way. And they don't care about what the outcome is for Taiwan. Look at Ukraine. Well, what is the outcome for them? Even if they somehow won at this point, look at what they've paid in terms of achieving that, which they're not going to, but we're just like saying that they might. So I absolutely agree. They are essentially doing the Iron Curtain again, and they're just going to be by themselves while everyone moves on without them. But I don't think that it's sustainable. I think that this is not going to last, and I don't see how they're going to get the upper hand. It's a matter of human resources. Eurasia just has way more people. They're educated. They've got modern infrastructure. This isn't like back in the early 1900s or something, or during the Roman Empire. Technology is making it so that the playing field has been leveled, and it's whoever is investing the most in human resources. Do you see the U.S. investing in human resources? I mean, no, I don't really see it. Europe, UK, no, I don't see it.
No, I mean, you sorry, Alex, please go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you.
No, I just want to say that everyone that's watching this stream and all of us that have been covering this. I mean, we know what's going on in Ukraine, and we know what's going on in Russia, and we know China and Taiwan, but a vast majority of the population, especially in the collective West, they're really not so invested in this. They're kind of very far observers as to what's going on in Ukraine and what's going on with Russia. And Elon Musk's tweets that he sent out are proof to that people really don't know what's going on, and he's kind of red pilling people, geopolitical red pilling people as to what's going on in Ukraine. But a lot of people are just not into this conflict. They don't care, and I think that the U.S., the collective West, can also use that to their advantage in a way. What do I mean? They can. You know what they can do? They can pump weapons and money into Ukraine and go for their Hail Mary regime change in Moscow victory. If it doesn't work out, they can try to goad Russia into really going hard into Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And then they can use the one thing that they do have, and that is their soft media power. And they can spin stories. And I can easily see the United States and Europe doing this. I can easily, and let me know what you think. I can easily see them saying this. The brutal Putin regime has destroyed Ukraine. Ukraine is no more. Russia won, whatever the outcome is. But they did it in such a brutal way. They destroyed everything. And because of that, we're going to have to cut off our ties with Russia, with China, with the East. And all of your suffering people of Europe, people of the US, it's because of the brutality of Putin. Oh, yeah. We're just going to pick up our stuff and we're going to go our own way. And it's a shame what happened in Ukraine with this conflict, but it was just absolutely, the fault of the brutality of this one man. And we tried to find an off-ramp, as like Biden said. We tried to support Ukraine as much as we could. But at the end of the day, the Russians, they played dirty. They did whatever they could to destroy Ukraine. And so everything that you're suffering now economically is because of this one man. That's how they might try to spin it.
Yeah. That is literally what they did regarding Syria. They were like, well, they got back Aleppo, but they destroyed the whole city. And I mean, actually, like, there's people who have been to Aleppo or were there or who have lived through the whole thing, and life definitely improved after all of the terrorists were expelled and they were able to start rebuilding. So yes, they're going to use media soft power to peddle it that way. That is exactly what they did in Syria. That is exactly what they will do for Ukraine. No doubt about it.
And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that Russia will be forcibly divorced from the West by the West, and there will be zero trade between the two. And the funny thing is that it will hurt the West far more than Russia.
Yes.
Far more. We're already seeing that. This winter is going to be horrible for the people of Europe. And they're going to say, oh, it was all Putin's fault.
They already are. The European Parliament, from what I understand, and I haven't been able to confirm this either 100%, but from what I understand, the European Parliament, which doesn't really have any legislative power to begin with, but it's symbolic, they are passing legislation. They're talking about creating a framework for Europe where that any European citizens who or organizations, companies, institutions, whatever that appear to have sympathies with Russia or with China or with this other world order are censored.
Yeah.
I mean, they're trying to
that's going in
build
that direction.
into the system. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, all three of us, we're all toast. You know, this new world order that is emerging. Once the Russians win, I mean, quite frankly, I don't think that we're going to have. We're not going to be allowed to have an audience in the West. I mean, chat, you heard it here first. If the Russians continue at this pace, it is reasonable to expect that by the end of 2023, they will have sewn up the country because of the overextension of the Zelensky regime forces. I mean, it's inevitable. It could happen even sooner because I've been thinking it's a minor miracle that the Zelensky regime forces are still up and running at this point, even when they have soldiers shooting at the backs of their own soldiers. That's the only reason that the armed forces of the Zelensky regime have not collapsed so far, but they will collapse. The Russians will take over the whole country, and when that happens, they are going to do what Alex says of just it's all Putin's fault. Anybody who mildly agrees or finds justification or rationalization for what has happened in Ukraine will be censored permanently. And that would mean that you're not going to hear, chat, you are not going to hear anybody who will disagree with the narrative. It's all going to be, the worst parts of 1984, basically. Brian, do you agree?
It's already happening. I mean, I'm not on Twitter anymore because I was pointing out basic facts.
No, it was all that porn that you were putting up on. Oh no, Twitter doesn't ban porn.
Well, I mean, you'd be surprised what they do allow to get posted, but it already is. It's a concentration of people who are going along with the narrative. It's social media. It looks like social media where people are creating content, but in reality, it is increasingly programmed media just dressed up like social media. So is Facebook. So is YouTube. I mean, this is why we all have an alternative. Like every one of us has alternatives now, backing up all of our work on multiple other networks. You don't know what's going to happen next because it's already happening. You remember all of these things the West had always said about governments or regimes who have to censor their opponents because they're insecure and they're afraid of the truth. And now they're doing the exact same thing that they have been projecting on others for the longest time. The most ironic thing is, though, a lot of these countries that they accuse of doing that, they're cracking down on what is just literally U.S. government-funded propaganda, agitators, people who are subversive, people who are separatists. That's usually who they're cracking down on. In the West, they are just cracking down on people who have an alternative point of view. And the way they justify it is by accusing you of being some sort of Russian or Chinese agent. I mean, I've been accused of working for multiple governments all around the world.
These damn governments don't pay us anything.
I missed the paycheck. Yeah,
they welsh on their debts to us. By the way, somebody's saying here, the Fresh Prince 1 says, I am a civil structural engineer. Such a surface explosion cannot demolish a bridge deck. Trust me. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. It could be that they have planted it. I mean, we won't know until the Russians investigate. But the terrible thing is that I will believe the Russian investigation. I will not believe the Western investigation of Nord Stream. And that is a sad thing to state. I'm assuming that you two are on the same page insofar as that's concerned.
Well, I mean, the Russian investigation into either or. I mean, you had to look at what they are presenting as facts and try to see it that way. But I mean, it's very obvious who did both. The side that was involved in doing both of these attacks. I want to point something else about the Crimean Bridge attack. They're boasting how civilian necessities are going to become scarce in Crimea. They're saying this. I don't know how true it is, but they're boasting about this. And I just want to remind people that this is only the latest move by this illegitimate regime installed into power by the U.S. from 2014 onward. The latest move that they have made to just torment the civilian population of Crimea. From 2014 onward, they were blocking fresh water going to Crimea. It created a massive multi-year crisis. It was impeding agriculture. People need food to eat, and this is what they were doing.
They cut off 85% of their water supply with that dam, which was, by the way, the first thing that the Russians blew up once they came in through Kherson. Yeah. Sorry, just to give context to what you're saying. And that pretty much shows that they don't give a shit about the people there, because they don't view them. They view them as orcs. They call them that. And they don't have a problem killing them. And that convoy of people who were crossing at Kherson to get into the Russian sector, and they blew them up. They knew that those were civilians. They knew it, and they didn't have a problem with it. And so as far as I'm concerned, these fucking people are fucking mad dogs. I mean, I'm sorry to be so brutal like that, but I mean, there are certain things that you don't do. You know, you don't shoot up a convoy of civilian refugees that are going wherever. You know, and even if some military person or something slipped in there, it's just a bunch of fucking cars going away from you. Why would you harm them like that? And yeah, the thing about causing the drought in Crimea, it was a catastrophe for Crimean agriculture. You know, Crimea is a breadbasket of Ukraine, and they deliberately torpedoed that ability to grow crops in Crimea. That was a deliberate act of. That's terrorism, man. That's the definition of it.
Yeah. And they act as if Russia had to twist the people in Crimea's arms to rejoin the Russian Federation. Yeah. They never talk about it had a special status, even when it was part of whatever Ukraine is at the time. The fact that U.S. aid did polls and saw that most people saw themselves as Russians. This was before 2014. And still to this day, the narrative of the illegal bridge, Russian-occupied Crimea. And just think about how Crimea has avoided the absolute worst of this conflict up until now, how they had avoided all of the violence in the Donbass and even the violence in the West, where the militant groups with their certain ideology were actually fighting Ukrainian security forces. Crimea was spared all of that. So I always tell people, whatever polls you're taking, whatever people think that they want, but just look at what the best interests of those people actually are and which direction they're actually going in. The Crimea rejoining the Russian Federation was definitely in their best interests. I don't know how anyone could argue otherwise.
Nobody can argue otherwise. I mean, anybody who knows the facts cannot argue otherwise. And look, I experienced it here in Kharkov. You know, everybody was forced to learn Ukrainian in order to do simple commerce. The people there at stores, restaurants, everything, they had to talk to you in Ukrainian. And the funny thing was that I did not know this myself, but I was told this by Russian speakers, by Russian and Ukrainian speakers, that a lot of the attendants at stores and restaurants and whatnot, they didn't know Ukrainian. And so they had to sort of like read from little cheat sheets, okay? Because apparently from my understanding of it, and my understanding is imprecise, but it's more or less like the difference between, say, French and Spanish, or French and Portuguese, say. They're Romance languages, but they are different. And knowing one does not guarantee that you understand the other or can speak the other. And so, yeah, and it's, how can I put it? Look, I'm 54 years old, and I grew up in the golden age of the United States in the 70s in Southern California, which really was the golden state. And I still cannot, I've said this before on stream, and I'm repeating myself because I'm an old man, but I, honest to God, cannot believe that the United States has fallen so far from everything that it was supposed to stand for, and that the leadership is so cavalier and so inhumane. I can't get over it. I'm sorry for ranting about this subject, but I think chat, if you agree with, understand where I'm coming from, hit me with a +1, because it really is just, yeah. And by the way, Brian, Alex, I encourage you to ask the chat questions too. I mean, if you have a statement to make, please ask their opinion, because chat is ruthless. That's why we love chat.
Just the idea of not allowing people to speak their language, or when people go to work, if people are at a cafe or a restaurant, they can't speak in Russian or English or whatever. I mean, it's so crazy, and it goes against everything that the collective West or the European Union with their EU values goes off about all the time, inclusivity and diversity and all of that. I mean, Cyprus is currently occupied 36% of the island from a coup d'état that happened in 74. Nothing good ever comes out of coups. Nothing good ever comes out of coups.
Okay, I'm from
Period.
Chile. I beg to differ, but that's for another stream.
Okay, that's for another stream. That's for another stream. In my opinion, nothing good comes out of it. But even to this day in Cyprus, after 48 years of having this divide, the government still operates with 3 official languages: English, Greek, and Turkish. All the signs at the ministries, everything is in the English, Greek, and Turkish language. People, when you go to restaurants, there could be from all kinds of different countries. And some people don't even speak Greek at restaurants or cafes, and they'll talk to you in English or talk to you in whatever language. So, I mean, the whole concept of forcing people to speak a language is so out there.
Or threatening them against speaking their language. And I just want to point out the supreme hypocrisy here. The United States, one of their biggest narratives that they've built up against China was the supposed genocide of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, China. And it went from an actual genocide when there was absolutely no evidence of that. They downgraded it to a cultural genocide. And I have, this is from when I was in China. The last time I traveled was like 2007 or something. And I don't know if you can, but you can look this up. If you look closely,
I think I can make you bigger. Hang on, let me try to make you bigger.
I'm also trying to do the reverse, but you can see that there's multiple languages on the back there, and it's Uyghur, Tibetan, and a bunch of other ones.
Hold it a little closer again, please.
I think my camera's got some problem with.
No worries. I think you can see it.
You can see it kind of looks like, people are familiar with Arabic script. It kind of looks like that, and they have Tibetan. This has always been on their money. All of their signs, just like Alex was describing, all of the signs are in multiple languages. They do not prohibit anyone from speaking their language. The language is on the signs. It's on the money. If they were, going to genocide an entire group of people in their country, why would they have their language on the money? And so it's ironic that the West is accusing all of these other countries of doing this, and yet Ukraine is doing it. Even the Western media has had to reluctantly admit it, although they downplay the implications of it. What Ukraine is doing to Russian-speaking Ukrainians from 2014 onward, how it is in reality everything that the U.S. has accused others of doing in fiction. And it just goes to show you how lost the West has become because of this leadership, and what they have done, and how they've misled people, and they've convinced them that up is down and white is black and left is right.
Snow is black. Snow is black. Snow is black is a famous Bertrand Russell quote. And he basically predicted and laid the groundwork for this bullshit that we're experiencing now in the West. Alex,
a true hatred, a true hatred for Russians is what it is. It really is.
Yeah, but that goes back to ancient ancestral hatreds.
It's there, and they haven't been able to shake it. This elite class, they haven't been able to shake this hatred for Russians, because everyday people, we get along fine. I mean, there are a lot of Russian tourists right now here where I am. I don't know how I don't know the flights that they took to get here and all that stuff, but there are no
thing that bothers me so much is see, the West is so concerned about other goddamn countries instead of improving their own. The United States is a shithole. I mean, you see it in videos of downtown cities, of the major cities, San Francisco, Austin, Texas, New York, Paris, London. They're a fucking disaster. And they focus on, what's going on thousands of miles away from their own borders, and they make no effort whatsoever to improve the lives of their own citizens. And in fact, they seem to get some sort of weird satisfaction out of watching the decay of their own cities. I mean, look at any city in the West. Look at it today as it is now and compare it to, say, 25 years ago. or 50 years ago. I've seen pictures of cities in California and in Detroit and all kinds of cities that today are just shitholes. 50 years ago, they were bustling, lovely areas that have been completely neglected and almost actively neglected, as if they wanted to make misery in those countries. Hang on a second, I'm still listening. I just have to move a little bit.
I saw someone in the comment section when I was talking about China, and they said, "Well, I remember Tibetans being slaughtered." Well, I'm looking at the State Department's website right now, review of Tibetan operations. CIA, they admit the CIA was running armed separatists in Tibet. So of course, if you're a person receiving money from a foreign country and you're trying to kill people in your country and carve land out of that country, the military is obligated to deal with you, to neutralize you. So again, it's amazing how we can all agree that we're being lied to about Ukraine. And then we have these blind spots, and we're listening to the exact same media lying to us about Ukraine, lying to us about another place, and we're buying into it instead of looking at the facts. I'm looking at the facts right now. Gonzalo is, I could even share it, but I mean, it's off topic. I've done many videos, written many articles.
No, go ahead, show it. I'm happy to put it on screen.
Okay, this one. It's history.state.gov is the official U.S. State Department's website, and they say review of Tibetan operations, and they talk about training them, giving them weapons, and keeping alive the idea of a free Tibet. This was all a CIA project. This was, look at the date, 1964. So this has been going on for a long time, and every single Free Tibet group today, I can show you the funding going straight back to the U.S. government via the National Endowment for Democracy. If you follow people who live in China and who have been trying to expose the lies being told about China, same as there's lies being told about Russia and Ukraine, they will show you places in China where Tibetan culture is promoted. It is celebrated and promoted. So this is not the CCP versus anyone who is not homogeneous Han Chinese. They're going after separatist groups funded by the U.S. government. This is a country that had been nearly colonized by the U.S. and other Western countries, and they don't tolerate it. No country will or should. So it's completely different to what we're being told by the Western media. I just would like people to recognize, if we're completely lied to about the Middle East and Ukraine, China is not the first place they're telling the truth about. And I can prove it with facts that they're lying to you. And I think we need to keep this in sight.
One of the things that people neglect to mention, by the way, is that the CIA was funding guerrilla activity in Western Ukraine in the 1950s. That it was actually a big problem for the Soviet Union at the time. And they were funding these neo-Nazis, these insane people. And, it's this kind of regime change. The thing is, it was just a portion of the government, of the elite, the crazy people, like the Dulles brothers, right? Alan Dulles and John Foster Dulles. But it's spread. It's like this weird cancer of the mind that is spread throughout the American leadership class. And back in the 60s, for instance, with the Cuban Missile Crisis, there were enough people who could realize, hey, we have to get off this merry-go-round. We have to get off this ride. And they were able to negotiate an exit that assured some peace and stability. But now we don't have those people anymore, those people who would be a counterbalance to the crazies in the leadership positions. I mean, is there anybody in the American leadership class that is credibly putting a counterweight to this insanity? No. It's just people slightly slowing it down because they don't want to look bad, like the Pentagon. They don't want to go full-on boots on the ground in Ukraine because they know that they're going to look really, really bad when it goes tits up against the Russians. But they're not slowing it down or trying to stop it out of principles. They are just slowing it down to CYA, basically. And that's what we're seeing in the West. There's no sanity in the leadership class of the West. They're all hysterical, and they seem to realize that they seem to believe, and perhaps this is a true realization, that this is their one last shot. I suspect that they are going to play for all the marbles here, and that even if the Russians manage to continue what they're doing without escalating in such a way that it provokes the West, they're just going to keep on going. They're not going to stop, because I think that they feel that they are drowning, and they're not going to let that happen. They're going to pull everybody down with them. It's like a drowning man. You should never approach a drowning man. Throw him a lifeline, but never approach him, because he's going to grab you, dig his his nails right into you, and pull you down with him. That's what happens when you are desperate and know that you are dying. And I think that that's the problem with the West. They know that they are dying, and that's why they're pulling everybody else down with them. Oh man,
It doesn't have to be like that for the West. I mean,
Yeah.
well, no, I mean, you and I are rational, and we would realize that it's not the way to go.
Yeah.
But these people have lost rationality quite some time ago.
there are no leaders, none.
No, there are leaders. They're insane. That's a different question.
Well,
Yeah, I
he means
mean,
like leaders.
Yeah,
like someone you would actually want to follow in
Yeah.
your right mind.
There's no one. Look at the predicament that the UK is in. The UK is in this problem, and one of the biggest issues is that they don't have anyone to get them out of this mess. They don't. You get rid of Boris, you got Truss. After Truss, you got Sunak. You got Keir Starmer. There's no one. There's no one in any of this. It's like having a team, like a basketball or a football team, and you don't only not have a bench, you don't even have anyone in the training pipeline to come in and provide some support. There's no one. There's no one. And this is the problem. You look at, I was looking at videos and photos of that of the Prague summit, the EPC, European Political Community thing that they had the other day. And every single person there, the one person was worse than the other as far as leaders of European countries. You want to know which leader stood out the most to me? And I'm saying this as a Greek. Erdogan.
Yeah.
And I say this as a Greek.
Yeah.
He was the one guy that came in there and he commanded stuff.
Yeah.
In his country's interest, or his country's interest. He said, I want this, I want that. You're doing this, Greece, you're doing that. I don't support what he said. I mean, I'm Greek. But at least he's a player. He's in the game.
At least he's looking after the best interests of his own people. I mean, whether you like his economic policies,
he's
I think we all agree.
Position, yeah. He's asserting his country's stature and position, yeah.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that his economic policies are kind of insane, but he is genuinely looking after the best interests of his people because he identifies with his people. They are his people in his own mind, and he wants what's best for them insofar as his lights are concerned. But the leadership class in the West is a colonial power that does not feel that it has anything in common with the common people of the Western countries, of the Western nations. The leadership class
the chat. Orban as well. Yeah, Orban was there. Yeah,
Orban, another. I mean, Orban, his bona fides as being a true Hungarian patriot are indisputable. I mean, he was against the communists back in the day when it mattered, and now he's against the neoliberals when it matters. I mean, he truly wants what's best for the people. But Newland, Blinken, Liz Truss, the other candidates in Britain, Macron, Scholz, none of them care about their own people.
Baerbock, Habeck.
It's a cosmopolitan.
The one is worse than the other.
Yeah, it's a cosmopolitan transnational elite that gives zero fucks about their own people.
And I'll say one more thing with this meeting, and then I'm gonna take off in about 5 minutes. I was infuriated watching all of these people in Prague laughing, hanging out, as if nothing is going on. Their entire continent is imploding. And these people are having cocktail parties talking about expansion. They're talking about expansion. I was like, Malaka. I'm like, you guys, your countries are falling apart, and you're sitting here talking about a greater European community, 44 countries. I'm like, this is insanity. This is insanity. You guys should be in your office 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to fix the damn mess that you've gotten us into. And not only that, if I was their boss, if I was Mark Rutte's boss, if I was Liz Truss's boss, I would say, get on the phone right now and call up Vladimir Putin and tell him you are sorry.
No.
And hope to God that he forgives you. that would be
never
my
gonna
order
happen
to them.
No, and the thing is, he also what's happened is that they have so pushed the Russians that Putin can't do that, because his position would be so weakened internally that if he tried to negotiate, because nobody in Russia believes any kind of deal is possible with the West. So that is no longer an option. I mean, let's assume that Rutte and Scholz and all these imbeciles had a come to Jesus moment, and they all collectively got on a conference call with or a Zoom call with Putin and said, please, pretty please, we'll be nice now. We promise. Putin politically could not do that. His own people would get rid of him because his own people no longer trust the Europeans. That was the issue insofar as Dmitry Medvedev. He was always considered the most pro-Western of the leadership cadre in the Kremlin. And how he's turned around, he's like this angry bear, right? He's indicative of the state of mind of the Kremlin leadership. Whether you think Medvedev is being sincere or not, it doesn't matter. He is expressing the opinion of a large, perhaps majority of the leadership class in the Kremlin. They will never make a deal with the West ever again. That trust is gone forever. It's like when your wife cheats on you, and she's like, oh, no, it just happened the one time. I promise, it'll never happen again. Oh, come on. It happened once. Trust is like virginity. Once you lose it, it's gone forever. And insofar as the Russia's trust with the West, it's gone forever. They're never going to make a deal with them. And the fact also that the Americans blew up Nord Stream and the Europeans said absolutely nothing. And everybody knows. I mean, come on, we're all grown-ups. We know the Americans did it, probably with the Poles, certainly with the acquiescence of the Danes and the Swedes. We all know what more or less happened. And they're not saying anything. The Russians don't trust the Europeans as far as they can throw them.
But do you agree, Gonzalo, Brian, that Putin would take the call? He would not act like a child. He would still employ diplomacy. No. He would listen. He may not come with a deal. Well, he may not come with a deal, but at least he would act appropriately.
Oh yeah, certainly. Yeah. Sorry, Brian, go ahead. You.
No, I think he would, but he would make the conditions so difficult for a West that is trying to trick Russia. They wouldn't be able to accept them because they would be painted even further into a corner. I want to get back to the point of no one on the bench in Europe. There is no leadership on the bench in Europe because they're not supposed to be leaders. They're proxies. They're supposed to do what they're told. And everyone in the pipeline is being specifically cultivated to be obedient proxies when they get into power. This is the whole point of the European Union, which unfortunately means everyone anywhere near the levers of power are going to be people like this, not people. And I don't know what it's going to take to actually get real leadership into positions of power where they can influence things. I would have thought, and this is the thing that I'm baffled over, Germany with their industry. You would think that the industry would be lobbying for some sort of sensible foreign policy, but it doesn't seem like there's any way for them to do this. Is that because industry in the US is just vetoing it in Berlin? I don't know. And we were talking about timing, the timing of attacking this bridge to coincide with the timing of what everyone is almost certain about, the Zaporozhye offensive. What about the timing of Ukraine reaching the end of their abilities, their combat, their fighting capacity? Winter is coming, and the economic impact this is going to have on Europe, socioeconomic impact. I'm not an expert in economics, but when they say they're going to suffer during the winter, do either one of you know specifically what it's going to look like?
Who is going to suffer? I mean, which country is suffering are you interested in? Ukraine's or Western Europe?
Well, no, just the whole of Europe as they go into, because of the energy supply problem. What is it
I can
actually
answer
going
that.
to look like as we go through the winter? I mean, I think people imagine like their beards are frozen and they've got blankets on, but like, what is it actually going to look like?
Well, I can answer that question with some degree of confidence. What's going on is that you have a supply problem. Okay, there isn't enough energy for the European continent, no matter how you cut it. Now, what the European governments are doing is that they are printing up money to give to the citizenry so that they can buy energy resources that are simply not available. And so that's going to break the currency, the euro. The euro is toast. Because rather than have their population face the fact that there's not enough energy for industry and principally industry and for the people, so they're going to hand out free money, and they're going to take this free money and go and pay for their energy. But of course, price is a mechanism of supply and demand. Price rises when there is less supply or greater demand, as the case may be. Now, if you just simply hand people money that you just magicked out of thin air so that they can buy energy resources that don't exist, the price of that energy is going to keep on going up because all of a sudden there's a lot more cash in the system to buy the same limited supply of energy resources. Okay, so it's going to crater the economy, even though it gives the short-term illusion to the people that the government is doing something for the benefit of the people. Because everybody, if you say, I'll give you free money, well, everybody's like, sure, that sounds great. But on a macro level, statistically speaking, when you look at an entire economy, an entire market, in this case, the energy market, there are not enough resources. And so the people are going to get this free money. And this is going to cause spiraling inflation as the prices go up to absorb all this free money that's been created. And what will happen is that the people are still going to be cold, and they're still going to be dark, and they're still going to be hungry, and they're still not going to have cell phones, because that's something else that people don't seem to realize. When you have these rolling blackouts or brownouts or whatever they're going to be doing in Europe in order to ameliorate the problems of the lack of energy resources, you are not going to have cellular telephony, because the cell phone towers require a constant supply of energy. They each have a backup system that's only supposed to last between 10 and 30 minutes. Okay, it's not something that you can go hours and hours without having a consistent energy supply. And so you're going to lose communications. You're going to lose. People are going to go cold. In the UK, it was estimated a couple of weeks ago, and that news got silenced, basically, that 1 in 7 retirees is not going to have the energy resources to get through the winter insofar as heating is concerned. Okay, and so you're going to have a catastrophe. It's going to be a train wreck in Europe. You are going to have people who are going to freeze to death. A lot of people. Not just here and there. It's going to be a lot of people, and you are going to have some sort of a cooperative arrangement for people all to get together, strangers, to stay warm during the winter. It's going to be a complete nightmare insofar as Western Europe is concerned. Paradoxically, in Ukraine, it's going to be okay because paradoxically, they're going to get Russian gas. I looked into it. I made some inquiries insofar as the city of Kharkov is concerned, and we're going to be okay, which is kind of like, I'm 40 kilometers from the front lines, for crying out loud, man. And I'm going to be toasty, right? And people in Germany that I've spoken to, most of them have no idea what's about to hit them. And these are educated people, by the way. And they keep insisting that their governments are going to be giving them money to afford the energy supply. But they don't realize this basic economic fact. It's not the lack of money. It's the lack of supply. There is no supply that can cover the energy needs of Europe. So Europe, it's going to be the order, roughly. It's going to be the Central Europe, that is Germany, Czechia, Italy, Northern Italy, Switzerland. Switzerland, well, there are issues there because they've been smarter. They have a lot of nuclear power and so forth. France is going to have issues, but the big hit is going to be Germany. They're going to take the huge hit. And then it's going to be the UK. And the UK is also going to take a huge hit. And we are already seeing it reflected in the currencies of Europe which is dominated by Germany, of course, and the British pound. The euro is tanking, and it's going to continue to tank, and the pound is going to break parity with the dollar, I would guess, in the next few weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, no problem, because this has already happened. You see, it can't be taken back. The lack of energy supplies for the European continent, including Great Britain, even with Norwegian gas or some bullshit like that, it's simply not enough. When you start adding up all the energy requirements that were being fulfilled by Russia, and the fact that that's been cut off, there is no supplier on the planet that, on a practical level, can ameliorate that deficit. And so Europe is toast, and it's already happened, and there is no way to fix it. Okay, I mean, even if the European leadership right now somehow magically made friends with Putin because of the loss of Nord Stream, and because of the other issues with the gas pipeline going through Ukraine, it's just not possible. It's over, and it's a catastrophe. Sorry for this rant, Alex, but I just wanted to fill in. It's
No, I agree. I just wanted
about.
to say, adding on to what you said, Gonzalo, they led us astray over the past 6 months. They knew what was coming. Habeck was running to Qatar, and he was saying, "Oh, I've got an LNG deal. I've got it." I remember Ursula. She was saying the U.S. is going to supply us all the LNG that we need. Don't worry, everybody. They were lying to the people for the better part of 6 months. They were stringing people along. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. Qatar is there. Saudi Arabia is there. The U.S. is there. We're going to find a way out of this. We're going to build pipelines from here to there. And all lies.
All lies. And the funny thing is that when they talked about America providing the liquefied natural gas that would ameliorate Europe's deficit, you don't even have to look at U.S. production. There aren't enough ships to move the gas necessary for Europe's economy and Europe's people. Sure. There aren't the ships. They don't exist. Okay? And the number of ships that you would need is so astronomical that as a practical matter, forget it. It's just not, it's over.
The deception was so off the charts that you had Schultz traveling to Canada, and they were talking about hydrogen fuel and stuff like that. I mean, and you had Trudeau. Yeah, Trudeau had to set Schultz straight. That's how crazy this got. Trudeau actually had to level Schultz.
The nincompoop Trudeau had to tell them the facts. Yeah. No, it for Europe, and I've been telling this to European friends and acquaintances, and like I said, many of them don't believe it. And I'm going to actually post a video tomorrow telling my European followers, get the hell out of Europe now. Because also, I think that what's going to happen is that the Europeans, as this catastrophe increases, they're going to get far more totalitarian, and they are already preventing people from. I mean, first of all, there's a news blackout as to any kind of protest, right? The Dutch protests, the German protests, the French and Italian protests, even they're all blacked out. The Czech protests, all blacked out. But they're going to crack down on those protests, right? And I would not be surprised if in the near term, I'm talking before the end of the year, they might start locking up their borders, of preventing people from leaving. Insane as that may sound, but I think that that's the way of their thinking, that we have to silence these people and shut them down and just control them and make them do what we want them to do, which is basically freeze to death. I mean, I think that's the direction of travel for Europeans.
They're trying to centralize the energy buying market. They're trying to make it all central via Brussels. That's what they're working on right now. The pricing of electricity and gas and oil. They banned air travel from and to Russia and Belarus. Yeah. As a European Union. That was the first thing that they did. They banned all of the media as a European Union. Individual countries didn't have a choice. Our tourism market here in Cyprus is around 35% Russian. We should have told the European Union, who are you to tell us who can fly in and out of Cyprus? Or Greece the same. But they all went along with it.
Well, as you said, the leadership is beholden to shadowy powers that we don't really know who they are, but who really pull the strings on this whole situation.
Well, my next question is, I mean, it doesn't really seem. I mean, do either of you think that they have a plan? And if they don't have a plan, and it's just keeps getting worse and worse,
I'm sorry.
maybe it's the same case militarily. They're not planning some, like if they are planning a false flag or something, it's just off the cuff because they have no idea what to do and they're just gonna wing it. They're just gonna.
I agree.
So I mean, economically, what are they gonna?
I think Gonzalo nailed it. So just I would say if you had to sum it up, more centralization towards Europe is what their plan is. And we'll see how it goes.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah. That's crazy. Because it's like the economic crisis and how badly Greece suffered, but there wasn't some sort of societal collapse. Things got really bad. I'm just wondering how similar will this be to that, or is this going to go far beyond that?
Far beyond
it was
that.
Bad. It was bad in Greece. Far beyond that, and I will say that it was bad in Greece, and Greece is still feeling the effects of that.
No,
I mean, people don't report how bad it was. Businesses closed. Lots of people committed suicide because they had their whole lives wrecked. I mean, lots. I mean, thousands and thousands of families destroyed. Thousands of homes lost. Unemployment off the charts. That is still there today. I mean, you have a whole lost generation that either left the country or that has never experienced what it's like to have a normal job. I mean, the effects of what happened to Greece was catastrophic. And I think, and I don't know if Gonzalo, if you agree, I think what's going to come to Europe is going to be magnitudes worse.
I completely agree. I think that what's about to hit Europe is it's going to make Greece look like a picnic.
Yeah, because the strong part about Greece, the reason Greece overcame, the reason Greece survived, is because over the many generations, Greeks have had a strong family unit, and they've had a home passed down from the grandmother to the parents to the children, and where the Greeks could say, a Greek 20-year-old could say, I don't have a job and I'm probably not going to get a job in the next 10 years, but at least I have a home. At least my parents are going to provide food, or my cousins, my friends, my family unit. At least we're going to stick together and we'll get through this. And that's what carried Greeks through the austerity.
Yeah, that kind of intimate family collective. Which is much more common and prevalent in Mediterranean countries, Spain, Portugal,
and home ownership,
Italy, Greece,
and generational,
ancestral,
exactly,
and that doesn't exist in Germany, and the social bonds are so much weaker in Germany. I lived in Germany, okay, I know how it is, and the Germans are wonderful people, but they allowed themselves to be sucked in by this neoliberal ideology. And basically made strangers of their own families. And so their families are not going to support one another, and a lot of times they're so far away that as a practical matter, they can't help. And so, look, you're asking me what's this economic crisis going to be like in Europe? This is the end of Europe, okay? If we think of Europe as a political backwater, historically speaking, up until 1500, and the discovery of America, because it really was, compared to China, it was trivial. And from 1500, from 1492, if you want to name the year when the Spanish finally kicked out the Arabs and Columbus got to the Americas, that was the golden era of Europe. And we are seeing its demise right now. I would argue too that on a historical level, it really started with 1914. And it's been this slow grinding process. There's a really interesting book that I would recommend everybody who's in chat to read. It's called Sex and Culture by a British anthropologist called J.D. Unwin, Unwin. He wrote this book in 1932. And he analyzed like 500 cultures. Now, I say anthropology and people roll their eyes because anthropology is completely discredited today. But this guy was writing back in the 30s. He was a PhD from Oxford. I mean, he was a big brain, and he was very systematic. And it's a book that has been deliberately suppressed and ignored because of so many of the hard truths that he wrote there. And he noticed something that 100 years, that a population that suffers a severe demographic blow, like a great war or something like that, it usually expires roughly 100 years after the fact. Because he called it the sociocultural energy of the nation is decimated by these big wars, and they kind of like collapse almost exactly 100 years after the fact. And you look at 1914 to 1918 and consider what has happened to Europe starting in 2014 up until today, and you start to realize, yeah, it's like they ran out of gas. They became this museum continent with all these pretty little tchotchkes all over the place, the beautiful churches and buildings and whatnot, but the energy of the people was gone. And they allowed themselves to be overrun by foreigners in the case of the migrant invasion, which is really what it was. And you look at it in that context, in that much more wider historical context, and it makes a hell of a lot of sense. And what Unwin wrote, I highly recommend it. It's called Sex and Culture. I highly recommend that you get it. You can get it for free as a PDF. It's easy to find, and it's really eye-opening. You don't even have to read the whole thing. It's like 700 pages, but the concluding chapter is the one that sort of like summarizes everything. It's like basically 30 pages. And it's really, really eye-opening, and it has some really brutal truths about society, precisely the kinds of truths that the Western neoliberal woke ideology does not want to face about civilizational rise and decay. It's a heavy book, and I highly recommend it. Sorry for the tangent, but I thought that you'd all would be interested in it.
Well, we started talking about the attack on the Crimean Bridge. I'm interested in what is going to go on in Europe, because this is part of the support base, keeping the proxy war going. And I'm just wondering, in Greece, for example, if people realize that the family unit is the most important unit, that it's like a cell in a body and many cells making up the whole body. Are people in Greece realizing this? Are they reinvesting in the idea of the family unit? And what is the exit? Is the exit, countries leaving the EU and regaining their sovereignty? Do you see that ever happening, or is this just a far off notion?
Greece, no, they're not going to exit the EU. Greece will be free of the EU when the EU collapses. Greece is not going to do it. I mean, Hungary. If there's a country that's poised to get out of the EU, it's Hungary. As far as family units, I mean, we fight. We fight against the neoliberal globalist propaganda and doctrine. It's heavy. It's ever present. It's ever present, and it has its influence in Greek society, in all societies in Europe, and you just got to you got to fight it. You got to fight it, because it's with you 24 hours a day.
I think that the country that would exit the European Union first is paradoxically Italy.
It could be Italy. It could be, but I think Hungary. I'll tell you why I think it's Hungary, Gonzalo, and I think you'll agree with me, because they don't have the euro. I think Italy is going to be a much more challenging exit because they are holding that euro currency.
Yeah, but the thing is, the Italians still, they're selfish. Their leadership is selfish, and like you said, Hungary would obviously leave the European Union. Because they're not part of the Eurozone, and also they're getting kicked around by the Europeans so much that they're wise to the situation. The people of Hungary are wise to the situation, so they might decide, let's leave this place. But it wouldn't be such a blow as if Italy were to leave. And if Italy were to leave, it would be much more catastrophic for the European Union.
It would be the end.
Yeah, it would be
the end.
Because ultimately, the European Union is France, Germany, Italy. That's what it really is. And so if one of those leaves, then the whole table tips over, and there's no tripod to keep it up. Who's going to replace Italy? Spain? Spain's a basket case, And so, no, I think that Italy would be the most likely, and they will leave if they start suffering badly, if the Italian people start suffering badly, because the Italian people won't put up with it, and the leadership in Italy is scared of the people, unlike in Germany and France, where they're not scared of the people. In Germany, the people are passive, and in France, the leadership doesn't have a problem repressing the hell out of the people. So, it'll be Italy that'll leave. That will set in motion the collapse of the European Union. And I think that moment might be this winter, especially if the euro goes tits up, as it looks like it's going. And if you have a currency that is just hyperinflating and they can buy nothing, and all your savings all of a sudden vanish and become worthless, that's revolution, man. And you don't have heat, and you don't have food, and you don't have electricity. I mean, that's how I see it at this time. I hope I'm wrong, because any kind of collapse like that would be not merely catastrophic, it would be traumatic. It would be, I mean, we wouldn't have seen anything like this since 1848, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you see where I'm coming from? In terms of civil just breaking apart. I'm not talking about massive wars like World War I or World War II. I'm talking about the civilian compact being exploded. I can only think of the revolution of 1848, to tell you the truth. Jesus Christ, we're black-pilled as fuck today.
Any responsible government in Europe at this moment in time, if it's a responsible government, they should be looking at creating a parallel currency, going back to the currency they used to have, and running it parallel with Europe, with the euro.
How likely is that though? How likely is that though to happen? Because I can't even think of any example of that. For that, I mean, that you're right.
No, they're going to bring out, this is how I see it, and I could be completely wrong, but as the euro goes down the tubes, they'll come out with some sort of European currency. They won't call it a digital currency. They'll call it like heating credits or something like that, or energy credits, or something to say that it's kind of like a special currency to have access. It's basically energy rationing. But they're not going to call it energy rationing. They'll call it like some energy credit that you use because of climate change, and everybody will get it, and it'll be deployed as quickly as the vaccine passports were deployed, and everybody will have on their phone the ability to get X amount of kilowatt hours, for electricity, right? And that will become the new currency. It's like in African nations, one of the currencies that they use is their cell phone minutes. I had no idea about this, but it turns out that because the currencies depreciate so quickly and so chaotic, economically speaking, that people traded their cell phone minutes and used them as currency, and they'd be able to swap them on their cell phones. Okay, I'll buy that chicken from you for 20 minutes on the cell phone, and click, they do the exchange. It's going to be something like that with energy. And they'll formalize it, and they'll create this digital currency. And a lot of people in the central banks of Europe will be in favor of this because they'll see it as a stepping stone to some sort of digital currency. They'll be able to control the supply of money directly. And of course, the governments will realize that this kind of credit system, of energy credits, can be used to shut down anybody that is a dissident in the European continent. And so they'll allow the euro to just hyperinflate away as they create this digital mechanism. I mean, after all, it's pretty much set up. Everybody's got a cell phone. Everybody was registered for the vaccine passports or whatnot. And so it would be a relatively simple trick to pull this in an emergency situation. Never let a crisis go to waste, the old motto.
That is actually a good point. There's probably all kinds of nasty things that they're going to be able to float. At least on the on the other side of winter, things will probably be pretty bleak. I don't know how bleak. That's why I ask questions, but I that's always the opportunity to roll out these nasty things. And I just want, because again, we're talking about the crisis in Ukraine. Alex, you were talking. What if Russia had just tricked us all? It's actually a paper tiger. They tricked everyone. You were also mentioning Saudi Arabia and others and OPEC. They're gonna. I
gotta talk about that. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, Brian.
Because I was gonna say, if they really thought Russia was done and that Ukraine is going to be on the outskirts of Moscow soon, why would they be throwing in yeah, I mean, just think about how much dirty laundry, the U.S. is aware of Saudi Arabia, how ugly that divorce can get. So I was just wondering if you could expand on that since you're here and the audience is here. If you could just, because a lot of people are panicking about the Ukrainian offensive, and they don't really seem to understand that. I don't think that Russia has tricked us all. Everyone.
No, I think you said it best, Brian. I mean, if you take a step back and think about this conflict between Russia and Ukraine, or this proxy war with NATO, you would have to imagine that Saudi Arabia, they've got military guys that know what's going on. China, definitely. They definitely know all the details as to what's going on in Ukraine. I'm sure Turkey does. I'm sure Erdogan has all of his military guys.
They all do.
They all do. India, they all do. So you would imagine if OPEC and China and India and Turkey and Iran and all of these countries, if they were getting briefs, if Erdogan's sitting in his office and his general comes to him and he's saying, look, Tayyip, I got to tell you something. The Russian military is getting rolled back. I mean, they're not going to make it. I'm telling you this right now. We've got all our intel. We got guys on the ground. We're selling them the drones. We're selling Ukraine the drones. We're selling Russia the drones.
We know
Russia's getting crushed.
Yeah.
So you better go back to Biden and make up. But they're not doing that. So I mean, to me, that's a big picture geopolitical hint that it's not going the way the collective West is telling us it's going. I mean, otherwise, would you believe that MBS would take such a huge risk and side with Russia and China and Eurasia, and even talk about entering the SCO or BRICS, if he had even the slightest indication that Russia's about to collapse?
Yeah. No,
I don't see
if
it.
he had even
Because
the
after
slightest
Russia, it's going to be
indication-
China. So why would you join the SCO if you knew both were going to be toppled?
Yeah.
No, but even if you had the sliver of a suspicion,
You go with the winner.
Russia might lose. Even a sliver of suspicion that Russia might lose, they'd go with the other side. By the way, my clue, by the way, was when Lavrov went to the UN, and the long line of all those dignitaries that wanted to talk to Lavrov, and nobody wanted to talk to Blinken. That was a clue. My thinking is that MBS. I was about to say that MBS's days are numbered. Let me rephrase that. I think that MBS's days of semi-cordial relationship with the United States are numbered, and that number is in the double digits, not more than that, because I think that they're going to try to do a regime change in Saudi Arabia. I think that's the thing that they're going to start obsessing about, because MBS, he knows he can read the writing on the wall. He is one smart customer. Ruthless as can be, certainly, but capable. I mean, he didn't get to where he is by being a fool. And so he knows, what side his bread is buttered on. He knows that Russia and China are the future. And he knows that de-dollarization is in the cards. And I think that the Americans realize this, and they're going to try to regime change his ass. I think that he's next on the list. I think that actually Saudi Arabia has become a greater priority than China, insofar as the American foreign policy establishment is concerned, because Saudi Arabia is their weak flank. And also, you have no idea how much of a complete freak out they had over the cut, the 2 million barrel a day cut that OPEC Plus did. I mean, they had a collective freak out in Washington, in Foggy Bottom. They're like enraged and they don't know what to do. So I think that they're a solution, like the only, when all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. The regime change for Saudi Arabia. I think that that's what's up next on the menu. And I think further that it could be, and this is me speculating wildly, but it could be that after the November elections, which are going to be very chaotic in the United States for obvious reasons, after that, there's going to be a pivot away from a lost cause of Ukraine towards this new problem of Saudi Arabia and regime change there. I think that they're going to bring up this fact of the 2 million barrel a day cut. They're going to bring it up and say, see, Saudi Arabia is trying to fuck us over. We've been such good friends to them for so long that we have to get rid of this madman, Mohammed bin Salman, and install, what's the name of the guy that Biden likes? You know, he's another one of those princes there.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, he's another one of those princes. But I think that's next up on the menu.
Regime change is a thing that they can use to coerce, not just try to they can do things that look like regime change without not actually trying to accomplish the regime change, because before it actually becomes regime change, it is coercion. And I think that I don't know if this cut in production is enough for them to, make the decision to go all in against Saudi Arabia. The list of allies or even obedient vassals is getting shorter and shorter. So I really don't know.
Is it fair to say, Brian? Is it fair to say, Brian, that all of these countries have a clear understanding as to the military situation on the ground in Ukraine, or is that an assumption? Is that going too far to assume that?
I know that, like, say here in Thailand, I know that there's people who are in near positions of power or in positions of power that understand it, and others who don't. And people who understand U.S. regime change, and others who don't seem to get it. Others who understand, hey, no matter who gets voted in the United States, this is the agenda and it's going to continue. It's not going to make any difference except headlines might change. So it's hard to tell how, what is the balance of people who are aware of it and are able to do something about it, and those who are naive or not paying attention.
But do you think like a country like China or India, they have an intimate understanding of the situation right now going on in Ukraine, like the conflict?
Yes.
Do you think they have the intel, the surveillance? Okay. You think they
no question. No question. They know exactly what's going on. I think also, too, what is happening is that a lot of the Western-trained leaders, bureaucrats in these countries are going to fall under a lot of suspicion, because they're the ones who are so naive as to not understand, because they drank the Kool-Aid. They went to the United States, went to some beautiful college in the States for some post-grad work or whatever. They got feted by the different NGOs in the States and whatnot, and they've gone back to their countries as satraps. And I think that they are going to be the people who are going to fall under suspicion in a lot of these countries in Asia. The Western-trained ones, they are going to be considered a fifth column. That's my appreciation. I mean, Brian, you see where I'm driving?
Well, I know that in Southeast Asia, countries are increasingly openly acting against this practice the U.S. has of meddling and trying to influence the internal political affairs of each country. They're very well aware of how this works. They know what the National Endowment for Democracy is. They understand how that works in regards to themselves, their neighbors, because every single country here in Southeast Asia is targeted right now. So they understand that. I think they're also increasingly understanding how linked they themselves are to what's going on in Ukraine, what the stakes are in this what is obviously a conflict between the United States and Russia, and then also China. Countries here in Southeast Asia are extremely paranoid about what would happen if the U.S. attempted to do this to China, because they're doing so much business together, and it's been so beneficial. And anything that disrupts that has a huge impact here in terms of economics, infrastructure, everything. And so, yeah, they're aware of it. I think that's why you see a lot of countries increasingly confident in speaking up against the U.S. You said there was no one online waiting to talk to Blinken, because it's like going to your boss on a Friday afternoon. If you talk to him, he's just going to have you come in on Saturday. So they know what this is about, and that the U.S. is using them at their own expense. There's no benefit at the end of the day for any of this.
Yeah.
All right. guys,
Okay,
I'm gonna cut out.
Before you go,
Yeah.
chat. Are we happy with with Alex having coming on? Hit me with a +1 to send him out on style.
Plus
Yeah.
2, plus 3.
Do
+1,
a
+2, +3.
do a Vanderlei and Russia's industry is in tatters before you go.
In tatters, I tell you. Well,
Oh,
Brian,
you're
they're pretty clever. They're using dishwasher chips to power up their fighter jets. So that's pretty
That's
smart.
incredible. I would be very worried about an adversary like that.
Man, they are stringing us along in a criminal way. They've strung us along in a criminal way. No doubt about
The
it.
greatest tragedy, just to tidy up that last point, is that they never applied all of this cunning and effort and thought into improving their own countries. It's always to fuck over somebody else.
Obviously.
That's the thing that's most despicable. Yeah. But Alex, thank you so much for dropping
Thank you,
in.
Gonzalo, for inviting me.
Oh,
Thank you,
pleasure
Brian, as well,
always,
for
wherever
inviting
you
me.
want.
Thank you,
as
guys.
always.
Great work, and just keep it going. Thank you, everybody in the chat. Thank you very, very much for allowing me to come on this Saturday. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Oh boy, we can quit now, or just hang out a little bit. But it's so tragic. I mean, how can I put it? I start off these streams always thinking about the specific issue that's going on at the moment, right? But then we start talking about the implications, and the implication always brings me to the same point, that it is a pointless tragedy that this is all happening, because it didn't have to be this way. And it was just blind arrogance and hubris and a desire to be all powerful, as opposed to recognizing that, the other industrial powers, the other industrial societies around the globe grew up, and they've grown up very well. And it sort of like reminds me of a parent that watches his child grow into a man and doesn't know how to handle him, doesn't know what to do with him, and starts fighting with him pointlessly. Because the United States, the West, could have had incredibly productive relationships with Russia, with India, with China, which are the inevitable next poles. Certainly Iran as well. Iran has always historically been a great empire. It always has been. It's always been the dominant player of the region. And it stretches back thousands of years. And to try to keep them down pointlessly, I mean, just vindictively. And this arrogant vindictiveness towards China and Iran, and now, oh shit, sorry about that. Let me move to a better location. And now Russia, it's just pointless, and it's so destructive, and it didn't need to happen this way.
No.
You guys hearing the air raid siren?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Yeah, sorry about that. Let me just.
No, it's okay. It's not like you can control that.
Well, no, I mean, like, I think it's so pointless, the air raid sirens, because what are you going to do? If you're going to get hit, you're going to get hit, and so there's really, as a practical matter, nothing to be done about it. Just have to hope for the best, and be more or less prepared for the worst. Oh shit! Hang on, let me close the other window. Brian, what do you have to say about all of this?
Well, I absolutely agree. This did not have to be this way. The people running the West right now, they will have it no other way, but it's unsustainable, and eventually something else is going to have to take its place. How difficult that is, that transition, that's another story. But I've heard a lot of people say, and I agree with this, I don't want to see the United States replaced by another unipolar order. I don't want to see that.
No.
But what is different about multipolarism? Nations like Russia and China and everyone who agrees with them about multipolarism, they agree over the primacy of national sovereignty, the principle of non-interference. Here in Southeast Asia, they have ASEAN, which some people try to compare to the EU, but it's nowhere near as integrated. And one of the founding principles is non-interference. So when the U.S. is pressuring every nation in the region to in turn put pressure on Myanmar because of the conflict there, they do everything in their power to pay lip service to Washington, but ultimately not do that because they believe in non-interference. Once you start going down that road, you end up in the same situation as the US, where you're fighting against everyone. It is much better to be cooperating with everyone. It's just so much easier. Yes, in competition and cooperation, there will be disputes. That's what you hear in the news about disputes in the South China Sea, for example. Every country near the South China Sea has a claim and is in dispute with each other, not just with China. But this is not something that is so bad that it interrupts trade or normal relations. It's nothing like that at all. So they keep it contained, and they keep everything in check, everything in balance. And that's what you want. You want balance because there is no perfect system. There is no perfect system. You need to have a balance of power where this nation knows that if they mess with that nation, there's going to be trouble. So better not to. The problem is the US and the UK and the EU, they created a unipolar order that had so much disparity between themselves and these nations that they were targeting that they were doing it with absolute impunity. What we're watching is a process of that impunity falling away. And you see this dangerous desperation taking its place, at least in the West. And you see everyone else around the world biding their time to try to, as gracefully as possible, make this transition without provoking or escalating needlessly. A lot of people say, why doesn't Russia do this? Why doesn't Russia do that? They know time is on their side.
Yeah.
They're trying to bide their time. It's like you're winning the basketball game. Why?
Run out the clock.
Run out the clock. Don't do something drastic that could end up actually losing the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And all of this hysteria from the West, they know that this is it.
I think so.
On a collective level, they sense that this is it. This is their last stand, and I think too that they ultimately realize that there's no winning move. You asked before if they had a plan, and the thing is, see, you can have a plan when you can see a way to win. But if you don't see any way to win, all you can do is thrash around, and that's what they're doing, and that's why it's so incredibly dangerous because it's completely unpredictable because there is no rationality to the decisions being made in the West, specifically in Washington, because no one sees any path to success because there is no such path. It's over. It's been over for a while. I would argue.
Well, also define success. That's the other thing. What is their version of success?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that the success for them would be some sort of booming economy and their near competitors being sort of like there, steady. I mean, like sort of like consider the period 1991 to 2008. That's what they want. They want this of like they're the masters and they're running shit and everybody else is just below them. That's what they want. But that period is over because of two factors. Number one, the others have grown up and they themselves are sinking down because they didn't pay attention to the domestic situation in the West, specifically in the United States. They never fixed the 2008 financial crisis. They doubled down on it. They kicked the can down the road, more debt, more fictitious money. And it's becoming a problem that is insoluble at this time. I mean, people are saying what a terrible government the Liz Truss government is right now, of simultaneously, doing seemingly contradictory maneuvers on a macroeconomic level. But you see, they're bankrupt. The UK is bankrupt. The United States and Canada are also bankrupt. Europe is bankrupt. They're all bankrupt. And so there is no solution to this bankruptcy. It's what happens when a person becomes bankrupt. They start doing all kinds of crazy shit and start thinking that the latest crazy scheme might somehow save them. I mean, you've seen that. You've seen desperate people latch on to crazy schemes, and you're like, what are you talking about? Schemes that in other circumstances they would realize are insane, but in their desperation, they've lost the plot. as that very apt phrase, British phrase, has it. They've lost the plot. They don't know what to do. There is no plan because there's no avenue to any successful scenario. I mean, that's my thinking. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, you have to think when you're having financial troubles, what is the way out? It's consistent hard work, self-discipline, a lot of things that the leadership in the West have no interest in, and they will never do. And so I don't know. And if when you're talking about an individual acting like this, they either end up killing themselves because of their excesses, they end up in jail, or
they try to knock over a liquor store or something, get some cash that way. They do crazy shit.
They cross the wrong person, and eventually that's it for them. So maybe that's what we're seeing. I'm just hoping that there are interests in the West that are ready to cooperate with the rest of the world and be among the rest of the world, rather than continuing this irrational. I say this all the time, but it's what I truly believe, and I think it'll be a tough time for the West, the United States, its allies. But I think if the right people, and I don't mean politically, I mean the U.S. right now is run by industry and financial institutions. You need alternative businesses, interests like that, to get together and start influencing what is going on. Like I was talking about Germany, the industry would benefit from working.
No, you're making a big mistake. You're thinking that the industrial base of the United States that we have mentally, that's still there, it's gone. The American economy is a service-oriented economy, and it's focused principally on finance, insurance, and real estate, the FIRE economy. Those are the people running things, and the tech companies, which are basically just, Putin himself pointed out that these are overinflated monopolies of no real value, and he's absolutely right. And so you have companies like Tesla, for instance. That's the biggest company in the world, but it's not a profitable company, or not particularly profitable. It shouldn't be the size that it is. It's just inflated. It's just nothing. See? And there is no industrial group in the United States that can put the brakes on it. The only group are the FIRE industries. Like I said, finance, insurance, and real estate. And they have no interest in putting the brakes on. And so they're going to go right off the cliff. God.
I've also, when I'm trying to explain to people about different types of economic activity, I just said, imagine a desert island, and you have like 50 people on that island. And they were all doing this, what they're doing in the United States, for example, playing games with numbers in ledgers, the entertainment industry. If everyone was doing that on the desert island, they would all die, because they're not doing the essentials that you need just to survive. They're not doing that, let alone the essentials you need to thrive. They're not doing that. And that's, people will say over and over again, Angelo Giuliano, who I have on my live streams, he always talks about the fundamentals. Getting to the fundamentals is so important. Whether you're looking at the health of a company, when you're thinking about investing, whether you're running a company yourself, or if you're talking about warfare, or just what's going on in your country right now, what are the fundamentals? All of the political platitudes in the world cannot paper over those fundamentals. They will catch up eventually. Anyone who has made a bad investment in a lousy stock will know that. All of the headlines mean nothing. If the fundamentals were never good to begin with, it was never going to be a good company, no matter what the propaganda is. And that is the West's strong suit, is propaganda, convincing people that everything is okay when in reality it is not.
Yeah, exactly right. And the fundamentals have been in place rather. The bad fundamentals have been in place for a long time. Look, it's not, the surprise isn't that we're having a collapse of the West. The surprise is that it's taken so long. That's the real surprise. That they were able to keep up this charade of an economy and of a society, quite frankly, for so long. I mean, this whole thing should have gone kaflooey years ago, if not decades ago. I would argue that the whole thing should have gone up in smoke back with the dot-com bubble burst in 2000. The fact that they were able to kick the can down the road for so long and to create the illusion that the American economy was still growing and that people's lives were improving when they were objectively not. I mean, you look at average wages and what the average wage of a worker could buy in 1970 compared to what it can buy today in terms of housing, in terms of automobiles and the basic necessities of life. And you see it's a catastrophe. Yeah, nominally, the average wage has increased nominally, but comparatively, it's been a disaster. You know, you cannot survive in the United States on 2 incomes with 2 kids. With just the average wage, it's not enough. And it's the neglect of the fundamentals of American society. I think principally American society, because I think that you would agree that the United States is the driver of the West at this time and has been, since the end of the Second World War.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so their neglect of that and the way that they deindustrialized. You know, the thing that's really shocking is to listen to any speech by Ross Perot back in 1992, because he saw clear as day what was coming. And he thought it was going to be a lot closer. It would happen sooner. And retrospectively, had I been the man I am today, back in 1992, with the knowledge and experience that I have, I would have completely agreed with Ross Perot. He's absolutely right. And I would have thought that the whole thing would go kaflooey in 10 years at the most. The fact that it's gone on for 30 years, that's the surprising part.
Well,
But
Ross Perot is like that. Ross Perot is like that annoying guy in the room that everyone is excited about this new thing, and he's pointing out how it's a pyramid scheme and how you're going to lose everything, and no one listens to him because they're all caught up in the moment of what they're going to get, and they don't want like I said, you need hard work, consistent hard work over time, sacrifice, self-discipline. These type of people are not interested in that they will never go for that. Everyone, and in the comment section, everyone knows someone like that in their personal life, people like that, and it's hopeless. It's hopeless. But why are they running things? Why are people letting them run things? And this goes back to me explaining to people why you need to look into everything yourself, examine yourself, and whether you've got irrational prejudices or misconceptions. Challenge yourself and look at the facts and follow the truth wherever it takes you. It doesn't matter what direction. If it's the truth, it's the truth. And if you're okay with that, you're not going to be disappointed. You're not going to have like some person you put on a pedestal and then they disappointed you. That's not going to happen if you're not putting them on a pedestal. You're putting the truth on a pedestal. You're not afraid to be wrong if it means going in the right direction. Yeah. And this is what frustrates me. I'll have all of these people in the comment section. Oh, Brian, you're absolutely right about Ukraine, but on Iran, you're wrong. On China, you're wrong. And then they list these talking points from the U.S. State Department, and it's unbelievable that they do this. But that's why these type of people are running things, because you have a public that will just keep falling for it over and over again. Even when they see part of the lie, they're still helping perpetuate another part of the lie. And so the whole thing just keeps going. It's frustrating, but that's why I keep going and keep doing it. I see that there has been a change. I mean, not because of me, but because the alternative media, as a collection of people working on this, I do honestly believe that they've had an impact on raising awareness and just getting people to question things. Even if this guy in the alternative media is not getting everything right, as long as he's getting people to question the narrative and encouraging people to look into it on their own, then it's a step in the right direction. And then maybe there's some kind of hope, because it's not just, hey, let's blame the people running things. What about us? What are we doing? How are we contributing to this? If you're upset with the way the U.S. is doing things, but every month your paycheck goes into these Fortune 100 companies, corporations, you're feeding the problem. I know it's hard to find alternatives, but you got to try. And we have to look at ourselves as well as the people in leadership. We can't just say, well, we have a free pass, because I don't want to do hard work and make sacrifice and self-discipline. No, we all have to. We can't just find someone to blame. So I don't know. It's a combination of things.
You know where I think the fatal error was when we started handing out participation trophies. That's when I think that was the fatal flaw. Because what's a participation trophy? Oh, you tried, so you get a trophy. But you don't face the fact that, oh, you lost. See? And it's bitter when you lose. Of course it's bitter, but it's a part of growing up. And so
you have to learn from it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only way you learn from it. I can tell you, I've been extraordinarily successful in different ventures. The successes didn't teach me a fucking thing. It was only the failures, the big failures, that taught me a lot. Because when I achieved great successes, especially the effortless successes, I thought, oh, I'm a genius. I wasn't a genius. I got lucky, right?
Yeah.
And what was most bitter of all in my own case was when I gave it my absolute all, when I did everything right and everything I did should have succeeded and it didn't succeed. That was the most bitter. But I learned the most from that, okay? You don't learn a thing from your successes. But our society decided at some point that we didn't want, little Billy and little Amy to cry over not winning at the stupid whatever contest. And so, have a participation trophy and don't cry. But see, crying as a child is necessary so that as an adult, you recognize your own limitations. And there's no sin in that. I mean, I personally realize retrospectively how lucky I was because I was a horrible athlete. I have zero hand-eye coordination and I have terrible eyesight. And so I'd always fucking lose in, running the 100 meters or whatever. And, the ball would always hit me in the face because I couldn't see the fucking thing. And then when I could see it, my lack of depth perception still made the ball hit me smack on the face with glasses and all. And so it was a failure. And I would see the other kids who were so much better than me. And it bothered me, of course. But I recognized my own limitations. And I understood the vital lesson that, sometimes I'm good at some things and sometimes I'm lousy at others. Those are my limitations. And I have to come to grips with them. Our society has deliberately decided, the Western society deliberately decided that we would never allow people to fail so that they didn't feel bad. And therefore, they never learn their limitations. And so we have a leadership class that has gone through this process of, they were given prizes for being compliant, not being good, being compliant. To give you an example, in my own industry, in the business I started on, I started writing scripts in Hollywood. And when I started in 96, when I graduated from college and flew out to LA to start my career as a screenwriter, I knew two people. I didn't have any film studies degree. I'd studied history and philosophy. And I started going to everybody I could get, getting names from other people and hustling my way to be able to put one of my scripts in the hands of somebody who might be able to somehow help me out. And that's how I rose in the business. I made a very good living at it for a while before I started writing novels. And the point is, you see, now what it is that the production companies don't even look at somebody who didn't get the right accreditation. And so they all go to USC Film School or NYU Film School. They go out to Hollywood and they have the right accreditation. But that doesn't mean that their scripts are any good. It's just that the teacher there, who, if he's teaching, it means that he's a failure. He couldn't make it in the business. That's why you teach. Those who can do, those who can't teach, right? It's an age-old aphorism for a reason. And so these professors at NYU who were lousy at their profession gives the accreditation to these lousy writers. And the production companies see, oh, you got a film studies degree in writing, in screenwriting at NYU. Oh, so we'll hire you. And these lousy writers write lousy scripts. And that's why you see all this garbage on Netflix and all the others. You ask yourself, why is it so bad? Why does it have all this woke ideology bullshit? It's because of that. It's because of this insidious accreditation program that does not reward actual craft, but rather rewards the person who jumped through all the hoops. And I'm talking about, making movies and TV shows, which is a very narrow business, of course. But you break it out and break it open, and you have MBAs who are running companies who have never run anything in their lives. They've never produced anything, but they got the right accreditation. And so they're put into the C-suite and they manage a business of a few thousand employees, and they manage it into the ground because they have no idea what they're doing, because they have no judgment. And you have people in leadership positions, political positions in the State Department and the Pentagon, who have no idea about war. They have no idea about negotiation and compromise because they never learned that. They only got the right degree, the right accreditation. And so when they get into positions of power, like Jake Sullivan, the National Security Counselor, that guy, he's an academic. And he was taught by people who had never had any power. And he himself has never done anything and held any kind of responsibility where his decisions actually affected the lives of people. And now all of a sudden he's the guy, essentially, or one of the people running this war, and he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. And it's leading the West off a cliff. And he just keeps, sanctions. And he has some weird ideas of nonsensical crap. And he's applying this to the relationship with Russia. And so here we are. You see my point. It's a bunch of incompetents that have good degrees from good universities, and
it's about their priorities, really. I mean, you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose of me being here? And if you're just checking, where they graduated, or your metric is just maximizing profits, and then, like I said, in the real world, imagine if you were doing that on a desert island where it was life and death, everything would collapse. And you have the West doing this, and empires have done this. Empires have become tropisms, where a tropism is like in nature, you plant a seed, it reaches up to wherever the sun is, its roots reach down to where the nutrients in the water is. It doesn't think about tomorrow and whether there's going to be sun or rain. It doesn't care. It just continues doing what it was programmed to do. You see an entire society doing that. They're not thinking about any sort of purpose. That's why when you listen, it doesn't matter who is running for office in the West. They just give you these vague, ambiguous platitudes. They don't have a specific vision that they could write down, bullet points and step by step how they're going to achieve it. It's just these vague platitudes because they don't have a vision. It's just to continue doing what they're doing, which is expand, profit, and exploit. That's what they're doing. And you see it in the business world, you see it politically, because the people in business are running politics.
Yeah. And what you say is very right. They keep on doing what they've done before, which has succeeded before. And so when they get to the terminal line, to the end of the line, when they actually have to do something, they have no clue, because there's no lesson book. There's no test that they have to take in order to hop over that particular obstacle. They've been constantly hopping over obstacles, jumping through hoops to get to their position. When they get there, they have no idea what they're doing. That's what happened with Boris Johnson. Liz Truss, same thing. And it's just so depressing. And so the whole thing is, And so,
we're back to the bridge being attacked, and this being for optics, and it's an agenda driven by these people that we're talking about. And so that's why it's hard to figure out whether they actually have a sophisticated plan that we just don't understand, or these are just unqualified, incompetent people who inherited their power and wealth. And just like a spoiled rich brat drives the Mercedes into a lake.
I told you that. I was the one who gave you that metaphor. I told you, the trust fund baby who fritters away the inheritance because he's never worked a day in his life, so he doesn't know the value of a dollar. Yeah, it's basically that, Okay, so let's wind it down. We've been going, almost 3 hours. It's been a delight, and because I was thinking of going, if I go on solo, I'll do like an hour, at most, we just want to get my thoughts off my chest. But it's been a delight, of course. And we definitely have to do this again. So to sum up, let's just go back to the Kerch bridge explosion. Number one, to draw some conclusions. Number one, militarily, it was meaningless. Agree or disagree?
I think it's going to cause a disruption, but ultimately it's not going to matter. I think
It's not determined.
It's definitely going to be a disruption. It's gonna cause Russia to have to do extra work. But at the end of the day, it's not going to make any difference to the outcome.
Yeah, I mean, what I meant is it's not determinant to the outcome of the war.
Oh, no.
And in the scheme of things, it's a minor distraction. Like, it's not a big deal. Okay, number one. Number two, definitely done by the Americans, or let me phrase it, definitely done with the Americans. Okay, and probably instigated by the Americans.
I would agree. I would agree that this was a plan they had been working on for a while, and the U.S. and others were involved one way or another. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Number three, the Russians will not overreact.
I think that they will not. That they are laser focused. You know how you get revenge when something like this happens? Winning the war. That's how you get revenge. You overreact, and then it costs you the war. You got your short-term revenge. What good is it?
Yeah.
So yes, I agree.
Yeah. Fourth point, most important point. The Russians currently are decisively winning this war because they are doing what they said that they were going to do, which was to demilitarize Ukraine. And they are succeeding in that task by consistently and lamentably annihilating all of these troops that are being thrown in like human waves against a breaker that resists them all, or that pulls back and gives up some territory to save their own men and to inflict even more casualties. Agree or disagree?
Yes, Ukraine is taking territory, but they're losing absolutely everything else. At the end of this offensive, Russia is still going to have its forces, its equipment, and Ukraine is going to be overextended, thinned out, and more vulnerable than ever.
Yeah, and that's not even counting the 300,000 reservists that are going to be poured in. I mean, just with the status quo of men at this time. Yeah. And so, and finally, there are going to be more of these provocations in different areas, not necessarily only in Ukraine, Russia area, but elsewhere, that will be blamed on the Russians in an effort to get them to take a misstep or overreact or otherwise create the conditions where the West can directly intervene militarily against Russia. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, I agree with the fact that they're going to try other provocations, and we have to remember they're not just fighting the people driving this conflict. They're not just fighting Russia. They're fighting any sense of independence in Europe. And so, like, think about the Nord Stream pipelines. That was not just an attack on provocation against Russia. That was also an attack on Europe. So we have to keep all of that in mind. They're going to attack whatever they think in their mind is going to advance their agenda, and that includes subordinating these countries that they're trying to get involved in all of this.
Yeah, and finally, something I've been thinking a lot. I think that the Russians are deliberately delaying anything until after the midterm elections in the United States, because they recognize that after the midterms, the American regime can afford to look away from what's going on in Ukraine and basically turn its back on it. And that's when Russia will be able to have its way in Ukraine.
Because for me, I never look at who is president. If you didn't tell me there was a presidential election, I would not have known over the last 10 years, because there is definitely this thing with Russia is not Biden. This goes way beyond Biden. He's involved.
Oh no, I recognize that.
Yeah,
but I'm saying that they're thinking that after the elections, the Americans will disengage. Let me rephrase those two.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. But what the timing that is most important is waiting out this offensive, waiting for Ukraine to fully extend themselves, and the weather changing, and the ways that Russia can exploit that to their benefit. I think that more than anything else, that timing is of the essence. I think politically, the elections in the U.S., I think that is not driving U.S. policy.
Okay, so you think
driven by it.
So you think that for the Russians politically, the Samarkand summit was much more important than anything going on internally in the States?
Yeah, I don't think that they pay attention much to that. I mean,
I think
a little bit.
do. Yeah, I mean, it does. It might factor in. I mean, just to be able to predict the Americans, if only vaguely predict
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Well, think about this. The one thing that is important about elections is it's reflecting what the people are thinking, even if no matter who they vote in, it's going to continue going. If everyone is rebelling in terms of their votes, it's a sign that there's a possibility that they might go beyond just voting, because when they figure out, if ever they figure out that voting is not going to change anything, then there will be a next step in understanding the sentiment of the American people, and which direction they're going is very important to understand. I've always seen elections as a release valve.
Mhm.
Trump getting in, I mean, that was a release valve. People were so frustrated,
Yep.
and it buys them time to kick the can down the road. Ultimately, doesn't really change anything. But I'm not sure, because I'm overly critical of the role that internal American elections have on everything. That might be a blind spot of my own. That's why I do tune into other analysts who talk about the internal political goings on in the U.S. or in Europe, just to keep track of it, just in case there is some sort of correlation that I'm missing. So I keep an open mind to that.
Yeah, my own sense of the American election is that I do believe that the Russians are paying some attention to it, and I think that they are thinking to themselves that, well, it might be smart to like hold off on anything really major until after November 8th, because on the one hand they're going to have the rainy season, and the ground will really harden up in mid to late November. And so, as a practical matter, they don't have to go whole hog right now. It might be just smart to just hang steady, keep on grinding away in this boring way that they've been doing until after the election, so as to not create inadvertently any provocation to up the ante. Like the Biden administration might decide that to up the ante in order to improve his own electoral position at our expense. And so maybe just keep it calm, keep it cool until after that election. And after that, they can do whatever they want, and the Biden administration will be so dealing with the fallout of the election, however it goes. I personally think it's going to be corrupt as sin, but that's for another broadcast. But yeah, I think that it's something along those lines. I don't think that they're like, that their entire timetable is based on it. No, not by any stretch of the imagination. But something to keep an eye on, kind of thing. You know what I mean? And I think that
also consider that there are people who really do believe in the elections, and they get fanatical beforehand, and then, like you said, after the election, they all go back to sleep. So
yeah,
I mean that would always benefit people who are doing something and don't want people being whipped up into a frenzy
exactly
by the Western media. So that there's some logic to that. So I think it's a combination of things. I think the weather and
much more important. Much more important.
Yeah, and the offensive. I mean, Ukraine is going all in. They, what do you do if Russia had the forces to stop them dead in their tracks? Maybe they would stop throwing men and equipment into the offensive, and they would hold them back in reserve. Like, imagine if Germany did that, how much harder it would have been at the end of the war. And they might have had to do something like some sort of political settlement. But if you can encourage them to throw everything that they have into this offensive and fully extend themselves, encourage them to believe there is a chance.
Yeah.
And then you have your force ready to go. So I think we have to really keep an eye open.
Yeah, because I mean, thinking about in those terms, what would happen is that Russia, the Kremlin, Putin and the Kremlin would take the short-term political hit of, why aren't you doing enough? Why aren't you hitting back hard? You can, that kind of pressure. But if it encourages the Zelensky regime to overextend itself and just throw away men and material to no gain, then you can afford to take the political hit and be like, chill out, it'll work itself out in the end, because it will, because the other guy is going to be, totally out of gas. I mean, metaphorically speaking, and perhaps even literally. And so you can have your way with it. And you will take the short-term political hit as Putin and the Kremlin are currently having, because they are getting a lot of criticism. But like I said at the beginning of this broadcast, I mean, looking at the numbers, I don't see why anybody serious can be criticizing how they've been conducting this war, because they're winning. I just don't understand this absurdity that they're losing. I mean, it's just, what are you talking about? If the Washington Post is reporting that in the Kherson offensive, the losses were 10-1 in the Russians' favor, i.e., 10 Ukrainian soldiers killed for every 1 Russian killed, then, dude, I mean, that's not how you win a war, okay? Ukraine does not have 10 times Russia's population. It doesn't have an army, a military-age men 10 times the size of the Russians. They don't. So they're going to lose. It's inevitable. And so even the Washington Post is saying that. So, I
agree. What the Western media is saying that. Also, people just have to. I want people who think that Ukraine is winning. I want them to explain to me, and with evidence, please explain to me where they're going to be replacing all of this equipment in terms of tanks. Where are they getting more tanks? Can you explain to me where that is going to come from? We in the beginning we went over that article where the U.S. is admitting they're out of ammunition. Where's additional ammunition coming from? And if you can't answer these questions, then what do you think is going to happen? Do you honestly think that Ukraine is going to throw Russia out of Crimea and push every Russian soldier out of what Ukraine claims to be its territory? And I think anyone asking themselves that question and being realistic will realize no. And if that's the case, and Russia has any kind of foothold at the end of this, when those 300,000 additional troops and their equipment come online, what do you think is going to happen next?
Yeah.
Fundamentals.
My thinking, and here I'm going to wind it down. I'll throw out my vision as to what I think was going to happen with the available information. It'll keep on grinding on during October, and insofar as the ground combat here is concerned, and the Russians will continue to encourage the Zelensky regime to overextend itself and throw itself out of these offensives that win some piddly ass village that means nothing. And then when things are right and they have all of their guys, their surge, if you want to call it that, the reservists, once they have got all those people in position, it's going to be just one big sweep. And I think that'll happen in November, December. The goal being to just sweep the whole thing, because they will have the men. I mean, something else that people don't seem to realize that I do believe that they didn't call up 300,000 men. They've called up a lot more, because I have acquaintances in Russia, and a lot of people are saying that they have been called up. The number of such people is disproportionate to merely 300,000 out of a population of 145 million. I think it's probably closer to 1 million. And in fact, in the decree that Shoigu put out, the actual number, the official number, was kept secret. I forget of the declaration of calling up reservists, partial mobilization. In the number, I forget the number of the decree, but you know what I'm talking about?
I heard that, but I didn't look into that and confirm that, because I was hearing it from the Western media, and they're trying to make it like, oh, they're gonna call every man, woman, and child to go because they're losing so badly. But no, I think that is true. And number one, and I think it's more than 300,000. I mean, if you're going to do it, if you're going to go big, you know what I mean? And so I think that number of people, even if it is just 300,000, that's the kind of force that you need to occupy a country the size of Ukraine. And I think that that's the ultimate goal. They're going to go all the way to Lviv and capture the whole fucking country. And I think that they're going to be able to, once the Zelensky regime forces are broken. And I think it's going to happen now. I mean, now in the next 90 days, certainly. Do you agree, or you think it's going to be longer? A lot of people think it's going to be a forever war. I don't think it's going to be a forever war. I think it's difficult to tell how much further this offensive will go. If you had to put me on the spot and say, Brian, what do you think is going to happen? This is pure speculation. So don't.
Yeah,
don't
it's a parlor game. Yeah, it's a parlor game. Yeah,
I would say, look, Ukraine is going to continue pushing. They may make more gains again. If it's between Russia being encircled or losing large numbers of troops, they're going to fall back, and they will continue doing that for as long as they have to do that.
Yeah.
So there might be some more, this hysteria, this optimism that is flooding across the pro-Ukrainian camp. I think the 300,000 that they called up, or whatever the number is, they're making their way. It might be a little while before you start seeing the impact, because first they want to hold the lines, and then they want to take back the land necessary, in these regions that are now part of Russia. They may or may not use this force to push even further. They might do another mobilization. I don't think anyone should rule. Just like you were saying, they might have set this up to bring in many more troops than what they said at first. So what you said is absolutely true. The size of the force they went into Ukraine with in February is not nearly enough. If you look at Iraq, it's physically smaller, almost half the population as Ukraine, decrepit, demoralized, poorly trained, extremely poorly equipped army, the Iraqi army, and the U.S. sent about the same number of troops, actually more, and it depends on which number you cite, but more than Russia sent into Ukraine. This country, much bigger, much larger military, trained by NATO for 8 years, well equipped, receiving Western weapons, but also they had their own military industrial complex producing weapons, plus all the Soviet era equipment. So just think about what Russia has done with fewer troops against a much more capable military.
Yep.
And now they're bringing in, like you said, you need riflemen on the ground to hold territory. It's just a fact. They didn't have enough to do that. So we're watching the rectification of that mistake.
I don't think it was a mistake.
That's what we'll see. Yeah. Well, you know what I mean. They're rectifying the conditions that allowed this to be the situation that it is. They're bringing in these. I think personally, I think they couldn't have done this sooner politically, and it's a political necessity to do this sort of escalation in stages to the point where they are at now, and they may be waiting to bring in even more troops to do like what you said, go to Kiev, go to Lvov. I don't know, but they would need more troops to do that, and they may have to wait until that is politically acceptable at a later time.
Yeah, I think that people don't understand that the United States would go into some country and not give a shit about the politics of the situation because, hey, we're the indisputable nation or some bullshit like that. And so everybody had to put up with this shit. But Russia was not in that position. It had to keep China and India on side and the global South generally on side and keep them sympathetic to their cause with this. I honestly think that they played it masterfully, given the political limitations that they were stuck with. This really has been an extraordinary 7 months, and the next 5 months, I have I have a pretty fair idea where we're going to be November for February 24th, 2023, and I think that, well, we'll see how it goes. Anyway. We've been going on for 3 hours. We're going to end it here. Chat, I hope you enjoyed it. Give Brian a +1 if you appreciated him, because I most certainly did. And I'll post right there. I'm as good as my word. +1 to Brian, because it's always a delight talking to you, man. I mean, I really appreciate
it's always,
you being on.
Yeah, always a pleasure to be on. Being on here, and all the excellent people that flock to be on your streams. It's always a pleasure. You never know who's going to pop in, and I
never
just
know who's going to pop in.
Yeah, I always learn new things, and I hope the people in the audience they keep an open mind and that they're learning new things. That let's just let's just remember, even I, at one point in my life, I was gullible. I bought into it, and I was enabling this whole agenda myself. I mean, I was in the Marine
me
Corps.
too.
I was a direct enabler of this. We got to keep an open mind. We gotta learn. We got to help each other to learn.
Yeah.
And that's why I love these this forum that you have. That is what it's all about. It's about listening to all different points of view and learning together. So thank you. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure, man. The most important thing I feel is the ability to listen carefully to what the other guy is saying, especially when it disagrees with what you think. Because there are, two possibilities. Either you're right and I'm wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong. And so if you're right and I hear you out, then I will improve my position and get closer to the truth. And if I'm right, I can hear your criticisms and realize, oh, no, that's not what's going on. It's, I am on the right track. So it's always beneficial to listen to contrary points of view. And that's the thing that's so frustrating about this show, man. I try to bring on people on the opposite side of the fence, and none of them want to appear. That leads me to conclude that they know fundamentally that they're on the wrong side of this.
Yeah.
I mean,
I had that problem when I first started doing videos. I challenged everyone to debates, everyone, my worst enemies, who people who have been like obsessively stalking me for years. And I was like, just come on.
Yeah.
Just come on. We'll talk, and I'll be, me, I'm not going to be mean or vulgar or but they don't, because they know that they know what they're doing. A lot of these people, especially the ones who are well established, they're making some bank on their positions, and they don't want to jeopardize that. Yeah, and they don't want to be made to look like a fool.
Isn't that pathetic? Because basically what you're saying in a very polite way is they are lying for money. They're basically whores. That's what I mean, you're way too gentlemanly to be as vulgar as I am to just call them that, but that's what they are. They're whores. What they believe is biddable. If you pay them the right amount of money, they'll sing your tune. That is just so pathetic.
And they can get away with it if they always have that barrier in between them and their critics, and they can post their nonsense, and they can play to people who are sympathetic because of their prejudices and their ignorance. Yeah. They can get away with it. But if you said, hey, where's your evidence? Show me the evidence. And they can't. What are they going? Well, everyone is going to see them for what they are. And they will never allow themselves to get put on the spot like that. So
yeah, exactly. Oh man, I mean, we could do a whole.
It's just going to be boring with all of us agreeing with each other.
Well, it's that we're all on the same page in terms of like looking at reality as it actually is, because I mean, lots of times we, on the show, you and I mean, I most especially, I love speculating because I'm always interested in the future. I always want to know the next episode before it airs. You know what I mean? And so like, I know for a fact that I know how foolish sometimes my speculations lead me down paths that are just stupid. But it's just exciting to try to figure it out. But the thing is, see, we all agree on the basic facts. And whenever I speculate as to what might happen or what have you, I always make it a point to put the caveats that we don't know this. This is what I think with the information I have available. But the information I have available, I make sure that it's accurate, that I more or less know what the hell I'm talking about at this time, or point out those bits of information that nobody is highlighting, but that are actually true. But these guys, man, they just ignore information to maintain their storyline. And that's the thing, that it's just a fucking storyline. And that's the thing. I mean, as somebody who cares about the difference between fiction and reality, because after all, that's where I started at, making shit up, right? And I always want to stay on the right side of reality. I want to be talking about things that are real and not, fantastical, because it's fun to talk about fantastical things. But ultimately, it gives you a very false appreciation of reality, and reality will make you pay for that. You have to have an accurate grasp of reality, or reality will slap you around like God knows what. But these guys know. They go down this. Yeah. So anyway, we're going to end it here. And Brian, stick around so I can say a few words. And it's always a great pleasure. Chat, I hope you enjoyed the show. I had a hell of a lot of fun. It was a delightful broadcast. And like I said, I'm getting over this cold. Yeah, and I know, chat, that I'm smoking too much, and I shouldn't be smoking even now. But I'm weak. I'm weak. I'm a sinner. I'm a weak sinner. So you're gonna have to forgive me. But I'm trying to set up something for Tuesday. But for sure, I'm gonna have Mark Sloboda on Thursday, shooting the breeze and talking about what else, And Mark is for sure on Thursday, and I'm lining up guests for Tuesday, but that's not a sure thing yet, but hopefully it will be. And until then, you guys take it easy, and I will talk to you soon.